But yeah, man, no, I appreciate you coming up. I enjoy episodes where I'm just kind of going into them blind.
Yeah.
Because we don't know each other. I don't really
yeah.
know the direction that this episode's going to go. All I know is that our mutual friend, Courtney Muse, said, hey, let's do a three of us on the importance of police training. And I said, I'm always down with that.
Yeah.
Contrary to popular belief, because I criticize the professional law enforcement a lot, because I think we're supposed to. Some people think like, oh, he became a cop hater. Nothing's further from the truth. Half my students are cops. Half my friends are cops. And there's important topics to talk about. And sometimes you have to say things that don't sound kind to try and motivate people or try and paint a picture of what the profession is. But then Muse bitched out and said, I don't think I can do that episode.
Yeah. I think that was like the good entry point. But then, listening to what you've been putting out more recently, especially that one episode, it's just so much of ownership and just having your own personal fortitude. I think that's what people need to hear, right? I think we need to, we talk about police, but that's where I've gotten more comfortable is trying to find that middle ground where you're like, hey, those that left, like, respect you. Like, thank you for your time. Those that are here, cool. Like, it was shitty, but let's stop being victims. Like, let's be there for the community. And yeah, whether you do 2, 5, 20 years, like that, as long as you keep it positive, cool. But if you're not, like, to your point, we have this limiting self-belief that we can't do anything else. And it's hard to recognize when you're in it. Like, I've just started kind of recognizing that for the last few years.
Yeah.
Because you have to think about your life outside of that.
Well, and it's the profession of police work very similarly to military service. People put it on like almost a pedestal, right? Because it is necessary. It is admirable. But people start to think like, oh, well, this is what I've done for so long. And then this is all I'm good at. And this is all I can do. And again, it's self-limiting belief. But you speak that to the universe. You tell yourself that just all but guarantees you're going to be stuck there.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people, too many people say, I can't do anything else where I can make this much money. And then my first thought is like,
bro, we don't make that much money.
That's really, that really sucks. And then two is that, right, it's, you got to take a step back sometimes to take, 4 steps forward. But do you need that much money? Or how much money do you need? You're freaking miserable, right? And
bro,
how does
100%.
that serve your family?
That's the thing about money, man. I talk about it on the show often because, you hear people say, oh, money can't buy you happiness. Well, it can certainly put you on a trajectory to happiness if you're smart with it and you do the right things and you invest in the right areas. But I honestly think true wealth is making enough money to live the life that you enjoy.
Yeah, it's a tool, right?
And some people might need millions of dollars a year. Other people might have a yurt out in the fucking mountains. And that's what they need,
Contentment, fulfillment. And money's weird for me because I even got into the race, and you would not think that there's a rat race with police work, and there certainly can be with career trajectory. There can be with just earnings. And I started getting into I got to be productive. And at the time that I didn't have kids or anything, I was just going to keep working overtime. Where did that money go? All into savings, which I'm happy for, right? Like, I was responsible with it, but like, why am I working that much to the detriment of my own health at times and to the detriment of my own relationships at times, just because I felt the need to be there, to, be productive.
Yeah. And that's the thing, man. It's always a dichotomy, right? Because if you have goals, say I need to put a down payment on a piece of property that I want to turn into an Airbnb.
Just hard these days.
Like, it's almost impossible these days. But yeah, sometimes it's like, hey, I'm going to grind overtime. But it should be to a means to an end, not just a lifestyle. Yeah. Because, dude, it was top 3, I think, when I was in, and now is it top 5 now?
What's that?
Like your top 5 years of earning.
Top 5, yeah.
So I know guys that are like, hey, I got to grind for the next 5 years to pad my retirement, and I'm like, dude. Yeah. Statistically, you're gonna have a heart attack.
Yeah,
after retirement.
Yeah, like
because you're fucking putting yourself out there like that.
Like 3 to 5 years after retirement is I think that's a pretty well socialized average nationally for cops, right? So it's like, cool, you're saving all this for retirement that you're never gonna pull. That's the money you never get.
And like, how many cops do you know that talk about like, when I retire, I'm gonna get an RV and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do this. Everything is what they're gonna do. Yeah. But they're not really taking steps actively to paint that or to create that future. Yeah. And like, I mean, fuck, dude, I was at the port and I don't know how it is there anymore, but when I was there, it was basically unlimited overtime.
Yeah. I've heard that. Yeah.
And there was dudes that worked 7/12s.
Yeah.
And they're pulling north of 300K a year.
Yeah.
And their entire waking existence is a port police officer in uniform. And I'm just like, fuck, dude.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would drive me to fucking suicidal ideations.
Yeah. A couple things that pop into mind. One is that 5-year thing, there's too many people that hyper focus on that I've seen. It's not 5 years because guess what? You keep getting a raise, right? Because you get a new contract,
right.
COLA and all that. So then your 5 years becomes 6, 7, 8 because they get so fixated on, I'm making more now.
So my top 5 needs to shift.
And I've heard guys that won't retire because they make too much money to retire. They don't need the money, but like back to that thing because they can't visualize life outside. So even if, cop's your identity, it's something to be proud of for sure if you're like purposeful and positive about it and you're grinding. But then there's people they're resigned. They're actually pretty apathetic about the job, but it's still too much of their identity.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And
no, 100%, dude. We have a lot of rabbit holes to go down. I'm excited. And, I know a lot of cops are sometimes apprehensive of doing the show because it's like, dude, Greg talks about some crazy shit. But I also know you're active duty law enforcement.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be like, so why don't you tell me what you think about your chief?
What do you really think?
Yeah.
Like,
you know what I mean? Like you're
let's
here.
Say the full name. Let's go actually like down your whole chain.
Yeah, exactly, dude. I'm not stupid. I know. And it's not kissing ass. It's when you are involved in an agency, you have to toe the line a little bit. That's just part of being part of that agency,
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing negative about that. But I guess before we get into it, I'd just like to kind of hear your background, how you got into law enforcement, where it brought you today, and then we can go down all those rabbit holes.
Yeah, man, for sure. So I grew up mostly in this area, right, in King County, Pacific Northwest, and police work, law enforcement wasn't really a thing for me for the majority of my young life. I had pursued a lot of different other things and went to college. But really there was, in hindsight, and I've talked about this before on different podcasts, but in hindsight, it makes sense that I wanted to go into public service. I always had this strong interest towards ROTC and things like that were available at a younger age, but it really didn't align with my heritage and like how I was, brought up. There's very narrow career paths or acceptable trajectories in that. So something I've reflected on a lot, but really,
what do you mean by that? Like your family's like, you're going to be a lawyer
so like,
or a doctor.
Yeah, second generation Chinese American. So I was the first generation born here in the States.
Okay.
Which, like the stereotypes.
That was it, huh?
A lot of them are true. Yeah, I was like,
dude, I'm showing my racism here.
No, it's like, stereotypes, like some people are like, no, all stereotypes are bad, but sometimes they're true. And so,
bro, they usually are rooted in something. They're rooted in
something. Yeah, and there's a lot of like not negative things like in Chinese American culture, that's what I can speak to because that's what I know and grew up with. It's like, so much sacrifice was made to get your kids to a point. So they're traditionally wanting more education, more opportunity for their kids, but with that stability too. So they're not like, hey, go to business school and go be an entrepreneur and go be like a billionaire. That's too unsafe, right? So there's a security aspect to medicine, to computer engineering, things that I had family members, like some role models that I saw in the distance, like extended family, like, okay, those are the paths. But as I tried them, I recognized like they were not for me. There either wasn't the aptitude or, the desire, right? Because it wasn't my dream.
No, that actually makes a lot of sense because like culturally, you see a lot of people that immigrate here from Asia and they become extremely successful, right? And like, again, is that a stereotype? I don't know. I bet there's data that you could look up that supports what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting. They play a game that gets them into the upper echelons of society, but not one that's almost reckless.
Yeah. And even my perspective is like, they're successful, but like how? Like I'd say moderately financially successful, right? It's like upper middle class, but there's not like, a ton of 1%ers, in that generation. But so much of like my family story and perhaps my story too, and my insight and ideology is based on the fact that my grandparents fled, communist China, right? So they were doing pretty well, and then they just left it all behind when the government took over.
What year was that? Do you know?
In the 50s,
the 50s?
So it was, my grandpa, my mom's dad was working for the government at the time, like the nationalist government. And so when the communists and Mao took over, it's like time to go or you're going to get jailed or killed. And that's like a very well known thing. And so, when we talk about I know freedom's a big thing for you. It is for me as well, right? And so we reflect on these things, and I get how, my family would be like, you got to be careful, and just you can only expect so many things in life, right? But that's such a limiting belief, and we talked about that earlier, right? So, but yeah, that's a big part of my story. To cut back to police, really, it was in college where I was, doing different classes, taking different things, and really trying to reflect on like, what do I want to do? I was doing the college painting thing. I was painting houses in the summer and running a business and hiring people, and that was okay, right? Like working with people's cool. Project management was fine, but I wasn't.
There's a lot of money in that industry too.
Yeah, service industry. Yeah, so and it was great. Like I was able to pay for my housing and a lot of my school, but it wasn't the thing.
Fulfilling.
Yeah. I found that I had really no internal motivator for money and for profit. I had to do something that I believed in and do something purposeful.
Yeah.
And so being up in the U District, University of Washington, at the time, drugs and, mental health issues were kind of out of hand. I mean, I said at the time because it's only gotten
because now it's more out of hand.
Crazy. I don't think anyone would have believed it if you played clips of from the future. I think back then people would be like, "This is an unrealistic movie."
Knock it off.
Yeah, this is like I've seen this zombie movie before, a post-apocalyptic kind of scene.
And bro, now Seattle, San Francisco, Portland, all of them.
Nuts. Yeah. So,
But you saw, I mean, even at that time though, you saw something.
Yeah. So like my car was broken into like 3 times and it was a cruddy car, right? Like an old, I mean, love Toyotas, but it was an old Toyota, like painting truck, right? I drove and shattered windows,
Bro, nobody's safe now. It doesn't matter what you drive.
No, exactly. And so that was a thing. And then I just kind of got disillusioned and kind of disgusted with what was going on. I wanted to do something about it. It wasn't strictly police, but I ended up testing for police and fire, knowing really nothing about it, knowing really no one in it. And then there's a ton of doors that opened up in 2007.
2007,
when I graduated. So tested around, talked about that a bit, but ultimately, you fail some oral boards, you do a little better. And then by the time I hit my stride and found confidence and was just honestly just being myself, I ended up working for Kent Police, so that's where I work now.
Oh, that's where you're at today then?
Yeah.
Okay.
So going on 17 years.
Dude, I love that you said, hey, I did some oral boards, failed, and then I found my confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, that, in my opinion, is the key to passing oral boards.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when I got hired by the Marshal Service, shortly before my oral board, they sent me an email and they said, hey, we're doing practice oral boards if you want to come out and like do dry runs. And I was like, what the fuck, dude? To me, that makes it even weirder. Because now instead of me just sitting down at a table and talking to someone like we're doing right now it's becoming some like orchestrated, choreographed thing. Like, oh, well, what if they say this? Oh, what if they don't say that? Like, I tell people, dude, can you have a conversation with someone? Yes or no? And if you can be successful at an oral board.
Yeah.
But that's it. It's confidence. It's just going in there. And I always tell people, because a lot of young guys come and talk to me about these things, being a mentor as a jiu-jitsu coach. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, man, you just have to be comfortable going in there and being yourself.
Yeah, it's a mix. It's a mix because I can speak from being on both sides of the table through the years and then coming out of the hiring unit, which is my most recent assignment until recent promotion. But essentially, like there is a strategy to it, right? And some of that, if you run through it and you practice, you can get more confidence, right?
Let me ask you this, because what I always said the strategy was to make them like me as a human being.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's a good theme. Yeah, for sure.
It's like, I can scenario-based training, like, hey, if you arrive at a call and this person's doing this,
I hate those
how would you react?
By the way.
And it's like,
I hate those.
Well, I don't know. I'm not a police officer yet. I haven't had the training. I don't have the experience. Based on what you're telling me, I think I would do this.
Yeah.
But I'm not standing here in front of you saying that that's necessarily right or wrong. And but just say it with confidence and stand by your beliefs too.
Yeah. I think it's good when you narrate your thought process because you're right. They don't know you. They don't know you from Adam. So when you come in and you show some confidence, but some humility, right? Those are the things that you don't want. You don't want someone that...
Some cocky prick.
Yeah, you don't want that. And you don't want someone that's not self-assured at all, right? If you're going to put them out and you're going to be super worried that they're going to get, blown over by a strong gust of wind, right? Like, you can't have that either, right? So it's finding that balance.
How recently have you been part of the hiring boards?
Yeah, so I got brought on, years ago, I was brought in as like a part of our traditional oral boards as an officer. And then more recently, the unit I came out of as a sergeant was the hiring unit. So we restructured our recruiting and was it? So lose track of time, but 2022 into 2023,
Okay.
just because we needed such a hard court press, we revamped everything, and we were lucky to find a lot of success. But from the hiring side of the police side, not to deviate too much, but really that was just connecting with people, right? Not trying to make it any overly complicated, but to the point of, hey, when you're a candidate and you want to show up well, like show who you are. And so for the same thing for us, being down in Kent, we didn't try to, make it anything it wasn't. We're like, hey, like this agency is going to be really good for certain people. If you want hard charging, if you want to deal with some legit crime and some violent criminals, you're going to see some stuff. It's probably going to mess you up a little bit, but we try to work on that too with wellness. And that's something that I've been a part of for years. But if you want, relaxing community policing, if you want to go to coffee every day,
go to the port,
go to the port. But yeah, that's a weird community too. And that's something that I've always said, like, man, I wonder how much the port culture is because you have a traveling community at the airport rather than like, it's not something where you can swing by the school. You don't have a school. You don't have kids like that live of the community.
The port is
there.
weird, right?
Yeah.
But it's also good. I always told people like, I have a lot of people like, oh, you must fucking hate the port. I was like, dude, I got along with my chain of command, and I don't want to say I enjoyed the job because, I mean, I don't know, man. It started to get monotonous, but it wasn't like, oh fuck, I have to go to work today. You know what I mean? And
that's great.
But it was also just like you said, it was a traveling community, so it's different every single day.
Yeah,
it's just kind of a bizarre place.
Yeah,
to be a law enforcement officer.
It's a different animal.
Zero residential. Mm-hmm. Which is actually, I mean, that's probably a good thing.
Kind of cool.
Because you're not taking a bunch of crazy drunken DVs and shit like that all the time. Yeah. But no, I kind of enjoyed it too. It was kind of a weird animal.
That's good.
As far as hiring goes, it sounds like you guys have kind of found a niche to where you can still attract the right type of people and whatnot. What I have heard from most departments is that hiring is in fucking shambles right now.
Yeah, and
same with a lot of military branches of the military. And you always hear the stories about they keep lowering standards, and inevitably, if you lower standards too much, you're not going to have a quality candidate capable of doing the job. Mm-hmm. But the other side of that coin is we need bodies and no one wants to do the job. What was that period of time like?
Yeah, I mean, we had, I don't want to misquote, but like 15, 20%, vacancy. And so we, out of an agency that's like 166, so we had a pretty good chunk. And
was that following 2020? Just a lot of people that had it, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that the people that walked away were like the old timers close to retirement, or the people that only been on a year or two, or just
it was everybody,
a little bit everybody?
Yeah. So, I could think of one of my really close buddies that was a really promising, up and coming leader, right? So you have those 5 to 7 year veterans that are really instrumental to the culture of your agency, right? They're going to be field trainers. They're just like, they're SWAT dudes. They're making things happen. They're going to go places, but they decide to go somewhere else, right? So they leave for the east side of the state, or very commonly they leave the state because Washington, right? So you had the mixture. Some old timers pulled out earlier than they planned, and that's kind of sad too, right? Because they didn't want to leave on a bad note. They didn't want to leave kind of with their tail tucked, and they shared some of those sentiments, right? So that's not me putting words in the mouth, but they're like, I didn't want to go out like this, but I don't know what it's going to be like the next couple of years, and my family's ready and I'm ready. And that's really a shame too.
Yeah. Something I heard, you probably heard the same with SPD, with Seattle, is their numbers were getting so low that they were pulling a lot of the old timers out of their like detective positions.
Yeah, I'd heard that.
And like, hey, you actually got to go back on patrol. And then they'd be like, nah, I'll just I'll just drop my packet and be done.
Yeah, and I don't blame them, right? Yeah. Like
you put your time
in craziness, and then if you're really that, like your body's in shambles from wearing a belt and the vest and all that, and then you're working at desk, which is something that you can manage. You're still serving. But then to go back into the craziness with some tools removed, right? If you want to look at it that way,
a lot of tools removed.
Yeah, and so I don't blame them either. Yeah, and young folks too that they probably visualized a career in law enforcement for their life, but again, I can think of one specific dude he was going to be a great detective, probably a great sergeant, and I was trying to kind of mentor him, and I loved having him on the crew. But pretty quick, you know, he had a kid and he was like, I'm not going to do this thing. Like, you know, family and everyone's asking me not to, and I'm going to respect that. And I was like, I respect you too, man. I thank you for your time. But man, I thought like I saw this future for him.
Yeah. I mean, bro, and I got out right as the craziness was starting to ensue, right? But I think about it from just a tactical standpoint. And I don't know if you guys had any presence with the riots.
Yeah. Yeah, we went out for a
all the
little bit.
BLM stuff. I had buddies that were down there like, dude, they're throwing Molotov cocktails at us.
Yeah, legit.
And we're told we can't do anything. And it's like, if that's not a deadly force encounter, what is?
Yeah.
Right? And then you start to ask yourself those questions like, dude, if I don't even have the right or the ability to defend myself, what am I really providing to my family?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's hard. It's sketchy because, you know, for years, you know, Valley CDU, right? So the port was a part of that, the Civil Disturbance Unit for listeners. You know, we have a regional team, and for the most part, I was on the team. Like, not a whole lot went on, right? Some protests, you're on standby, that kind of thing. But for a few years prior to 2020, the Seattle May Day riots started kicking up. And if you're listening to the radio traffic, which most cops in the area did, whether they responded or not, they're listening to, you know, dumpsters being lit on fire. So like literal dumpster fires and being like shoved down the alley. Molotov cocktails, you know, so everything. And oftentimes we'd be on standby until things started getting hairy, and then they'd, hey, like bring out the weirdos, right, from the Valley, because we weren't quite as hindered by policy and such. But we responded as the Valley team to Seattle like the first major day, or amongst the first major days of the violent riots and the destruction. And that was gnarly, right? It's something I felt was like a video game, you know, where you're like a war video game where everything's foggy, like there's so much smoke and gas, and there's a guy that's like, all right, come on, follow me. And then you put on your mask and your helmet, so your visual is so limited. So you do really feel like you're in like a video game where you have to like actively turn your body to look around.
Dude, it's funny. My same buddy that was telling me about the Molotov cocktails, he said the same thing. He goes, bro, I'm not trying to like compare what I went through down there to like what you did in Ramadi.
Yeah, and I would never,
And he goes, but while I was in it, it didn't feel like a police officer on patrol. It felt like a soldier in combat. Because that is what it felt like, and described it exactly. And I said, bro, like, just because I experienced that on the other side of the world doesn't take away that you actually experienced that right here in Seattle, Washington. You were in fear for your life. People were fucking doing things at you that you felt you could fucking lose your life at any minute, and it was chaotic, and it was a difficult situation. I was like, I'm not here to compare either, because in that moment, that's what you were experiencing. That's pretty fucking crazy. Yeah. That we have our patrol officers feeling like they're in a combat zone.
Yeah.
Downtown Seattle. You know?
And it's just the sensory overload, and it's the hypervigilance to the point where you're right. Like, if you're responsibly minded, if you're reasonable, you're like, I could take a round from anywhere right now. There's no way that we could really even address it or know, which is terrifying, right?
Yeah.
And then to talk to the bike guys, like I was on foot, like the foot squad, team leader for one of our squads, and you know, to talk to one of the bike guys who was somewhere else later, he was just like, we were trying to close things off and round people up, but he's like, we just recognize, like, if that mob mentality takes over, we are effed.
You're
right?
Fucked, man.
It's like terrifying, right? And one of my buddies took a rock. The other one, you know, they had to arrest someone that wasn't listening, and then his mask got knocked off, and then become, you know, a little scramble, and then he's taking gas, you know, into his lungs, and so it's just it was super hectic, right?
Well, and dude, I think that like, and this isn't to push the anti-government narrative, but we all kind of agree. We have this unwritten agreement to how our society functions, and that we treat our law enforcement officers with respect, and that we don't commit egregious crimes against each other. Like a lot of the reasons why society works is because everybody just kind of agrees to go along with the system that's in place.
For sure.
Now, some people do that out of their own morals and ethics. Other people do it out of fear of repetions,
I was
right?
literally just talking to a retired cop on my show yesterday
About
about fear. Yeah. And he's
Yeah.
just like, you know, he was talking about how him and a guy down in Broward County sheriffs, they just shut down like a crazy block party by themselves back when. He's like, you could not do that now.
No.
Like,
yeah.
you don't get stomped.
Well,
So-
you think about it, like, take it to something egregious like violent rape, right? You and I aren't going to partake in that because our morals
yeah.
direct us to think that that kind of stuff is abhorrent, right? But there's other people that need, hey, if you get caught doing this, we're going to fucking castrate you.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I won't do that now,
Yeah.
right?
Well, there's
Like,
countries where that is what's going to happen, you know, at best, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a different, I suppose, societal code because it's risk reward, right? And
Yeah.
That's life. Life is risk reward, and it's assessing that.
But bro, when I look at all of these incidents, like what you were just talking about, dude, BLM was just a bunch of lost kids being fucking retards out on the street.
Well, some, right? Like, or like who's
The
there? Right?
Antifa agitators and all that stuff.
There's like the entity, right? The corporate. I don't want to misspeak, but there's the leaders, and then there's people following because they like the message, which is like awesome, right? And then there's people that are, to your point, maybe kids that are showing up to watch a show and be part of.
I think
the
a lot
getting
of those
nuts.
kids were just drawn to chaos. I was drawn to chaos when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
But my chaos,
Took you into the military.
my chaos was socially acceptable. In fact, when I went and partook in chaos, I came home and people were like, revered that. Oh, you went to Ramadi, you know?
Right.
And it's like, nah, it's the same shit. I'm just drawn to violence and fighting and getting in gunfights and blowing things up. Like, there's something about chaos that calls to young men for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But to my point, to go back to what I even brought all this up for is, man, society is clinging together and functioning by threads, you know? And you see, just like you said, two guys used to be able to shut a block party down.
Yeah.
Now what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And if it keeps going on this trajectory, I think people are less and less likely to kind of respect law enforcement's positions. And then that's just sooner or later, when does the scale shift to where people are just doing whatever the fuck they want?
Well, yeah, we're talking about lawlessness, right? And so, you know, speaking about the Seattle riots, like we were there for a day as the Valley team, and then after that, Seattle put out the ban on gas. And so, good on our leadership, right? Because they're like, we want to help, we feel for you, like the cops in the community. But if you make a stipulation like that, like we can't keep our people safe, so we
we're
can't
out.
keep your people, so we're out.
That's what your
Right? It was
leadership
like Shark
said,
Tank,
huh?
like no
and
gas.
I'm proud
we're
of
out.
whoever made that call.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
like
a
the Valley
lot of
Chiefs,
people
yeah.
at the highest levels are always trying to play both sides of the fence, right?
Yeah.
And that's a command leadership decision. Like, hey, you want to hamstring our guys? They're out of there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. That was from the top. From my understanding, like the Valley Chiefs are like, there's no way, guys. Like you can't do that. And it's sometimes I wonder if it's kind of like that nudge, the peer nudge, like don't do that. Like you're gonna put your guys in a bad spot. And
Yeah, hoping that someone with common sense on the other side would be like, hey, you know what? We don't want to lose these resources that were allocated to us. You're probably right.
And then it became, you know, those folks like Seattle. Like my heart goes out to the Seattle folks still, right? Like my bros and sisters.
Dude,
but
it's gnarly down there.
how many days for how long is shifts? Like 18-hour days, right? Day after day after day, mandates, right? And everyone's pulled out of their specialties. Everyone's pulled out to the street. And then fast forward, you got the Chop Chaz where lawlessness, you actually relinquish an area, a whole neighborhood where
Bro, they took over one of the precincts.
yes,
Like, what are we talking
they
about?
abandoned a precinct. And so like I know that hurts. Like I'm not pointing fingers or jabbing at the cops. Like that's a leadership decision, right? And
Yeah, but that's also something they may not be taking into consideration is moral victories on the battlefield matter. You know what I'm saying? When you have to leave with your tail tucked between your legs and everybody is celebrating their victory, that feels like shit, man.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and something real quick, there's the actual community there that doesn't want you to run away, right? There are like business owners and residents that were like terrified, or business owners weren't there and their business just got ransacked, right? Like
Yeah.
that's someone's life, right? That's someone's livelihood. We can't neglect that. That's
Well, no, if
protect
they're-
and serve. We're not doing that.
If their tax dollars are paying for us to protect and serve, and then we just tuck tail and run, what are we telling the community? You know? And that's a lot of people over that period of time started to arrive at the point, like all of my merchandise says, like, no one's coming to save you,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of times, a lot of people like that mindset because it's empowering for yourself to become capable, right?
It should be.
But
That's-
every
that's
once
the
in a while,
twist.
yeah,
That's the
every
twist,
once in a
yeah.
while, people get like offended, And I hear people be offended, especially sometimes in the law enforcement profession, because they think I'm like taking a jab at them. But it goes back to what you said, man. And I tell this on the show all the time. Most people in patrol, boots on the ground, they want to be doing the right thing.
Yes.
At least in my experience.
Yes.
You know, the profession of policing has this reputation where it's like, oh, they were just nerds that got bullied and now they're power hungry with a badge and a gun. And it's like, I didn't see that much though. I didn't, man.
Yeah.
And what I saw was good people that enjoyed the job, that a lot of them weren't to the standard that I think police should be to. That's just being honest. Like we had an hour of fit time every single day and a lot of people didn't use it.
Which is like, that should be the standard.
It should be the standard, right? But they weren't shitty people. Where the profession starts to lack, in my opinion, is usually policy and directives that come from the top that the boots on the ground typically don't agree with. But then it gets into that place. It's like, well, what do I do in this situation? Do I walk away because I don't like it? Or do I try and stay and affect change in a positive manner? Yeah. And that's where every man has to face that decision. You know?
I think that's the crux of it, right? Like, can I do more good with the constraints I have? And most cops that decided to stay could, right? And every agency's different. And so for listeners, I think it's still not common knowledge, right? Every single city or county or, state agency, like it's like a different company, right? So just because you work retail, it's not the same.
Yeah.
Different decisions, right? You work at Target versus Fred Meyer, like different decisions allow you to do the job differently. And so there was a lot of play and a lot of range, I suppose, even in somewhere like King County, when you looked at how different agencies responded to different things and pressures.
Yeah.
Most people are trying to do their best. And when I make the joke, there's some nerds that, like, cops are all types. Like, they're just all types of people.
There's some that are psychopaths that probably have fucking girls in a dungeon somewhere. You know what I mean? Like,
and you see the news every now and then, right? Like, something terrible happens again somewhere. And I'd just like to say, maybe it's redundant, but I'll make it continually redundant. But like, no one hates bad cops more than cops.
Bro, that's the truth, man. Yeah. That is the truth. Even not bad ones with girls in the dungeon somewhere, just lazy ones, or just ones that don't take the job serious. Like the guys that are meat eaters, the guys that do take it serious, and that's always going to be a problem for them. But I also don't know what the solution is, man. Like, and I know you're big into training, right? What's your official capacity with training these days?
Right now, so when the original conversation, like I was double tapped with hiring and training sergeant. And so that was only a short stint that I was in training. My thing is more just a prerogative to keep training, right? And I'm a big thing into fitness and then peer support, so like wellness. So right now I'm a commander and I oversee patrol operations and wellness. And so that's trying to grow a lot of our wellness programs.
What would you say is the best way to incentivize officers to be fit, healthy, strong, and capable?
I think that's multi-pronged, right? Like that's like literally some people are into some degree of shame, right? You look at Instagram and some people are like, hey, fat cops, like enough. And like, that's not wrong. But at the same time, like, how do we encourage people? I think we have to build it. We have to build it into the culture, right? So I try to write on Police One, and that's a pretty pretty well known, like police publication, but like really just to say like, hey, here's all the tools, but we need to socialize this. Like wellness should be a tenet of your culture. And so that gets integrated right in with leadership. So that's kind of like my trifecta that I'm trying to play around with. But I think it starts at the top, right? But it also starts at the bottom where you empower and you enable people to work out on duty. Like you guys had an hour of fit time.
Yeah.
But how many people used it?
Yeah, a lot didn't use it.
Yeah. And so that's only one piece. Yeah.
And we also had a fitness incentive, which was $1,000 bonus. And bro, this $1,000 bonus wasn't to perform at any level on the PT test. It was just to take it.
Just to do it.
Just to do it.
Wow.
And I don't remember exactly what the percentage was, but the overwhelming majority of officers did not partake in that. And it's like, you're not willing to go run 1.5 miles, do sit-ups and push-ups for $1,000? Like what? How else can you incentivize people, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember I told my commander, I was like, I'll come in and take a PT test every morning of the year if I can get $1,000 for each one. Yeah, you know?
Oh my gosh.
But no, I think about this too, because what can you really do? At the end of the day, the individual has to look at themselves in the mirror and have the drive to be better. And if they don't, man, fit time, bonuses, incentives, they don't really seem to hit the mark in a way that because guys like us that work out every day, I'll go smash a PT test for $1,000. But for people that that's not part of their life, that doesn't light a fire under them and say, okay, I'm going to go do this, you know? And I agree with you, man. Like, it's bullying and fat shaming. Those two things have, everybody always attaches negative connotations to those. But bro, even me personally, there was a time in my life being bullied at the bus stop, and I went home and told my dad, and my dad looked at me and goes, what do you want me to do, Greg? You want me to go to the bus stop and beat up a 9-year-old? Is that what you're asking me to do? He's like, I can teach you how to deal with it, but don't come to me crying that another kid's being mean to you, because that's your problem to solve.
Yeah.
And
do you remember? Yeah. So what did your brain do at that point?
He told me to go next time he starts being mean to me, to punch him in the face. I was like, okay, this is what dad wants me to do.
Did you feel empowered by that?
Of course, man. And you're shocking to hear it worked, you know? And I mean, I was 9. I don't think you can even hurt people when you're 9 by punching them. But it's not about the physical aspect of it. It's about the emotional side of who you are, saying, I'm not your victim.
Yeah.
So go find a different one. And that kind of stuff is important, man. And also, like, if you're in a circle of people who are motivated and healthy people, and you notice that your homie is starting to fucking put on some pounds, you should say, like, bro, what are you doing? What's going on right now? Because you're usually one of the guys, and now you're starting to look like you're letting yourself go. And sometimes harsh words are actually rooted in love.
Yes.
You know?
Right. It's the difference between nice and kind, right? Like, you can be nice and we can dance around things and never address these things, but like, to be kind is to be direct, right? It's to be honest, and you need, trust and relationship to have that received. But that's the crux, right? And if you talk about how do we get people to blank, right? How do we get people to be more fit, to take care of themselves? Like, that's leadership. And that's like maybe it's the $1 million question, right? Like, how do you get people to do something they don't want to do?
Well, I think when you said it starts with a culture is hitting the nail on the head, but I don't think we can really instill that culture in people when they're 30 years old. You know, we have really, you see all those videos circulating on social media of like gym class in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Every single boy had a 6-pack.
Yeah.
Every single boy could knock out 15 pull-ups.
Yeah.
And do the monkey bars and climb the ropes. And it's like, our bodies want to do those things. And we've just backed off the gas more and more and more and more to now the majority of kids are overweight. The majority of kids are sick. And I was fortunate enough, like, I wasn't much of an athlete growing up. I wrestled and I did track and some of this whatever just as a young boy. But I didn't understand fitness and exercise and the importance of it until I got into the Ranger Regiment. And here I am, 18 years old, and I'll never forget this because there was kids that like were diehard athletes their whole life.
Yeah.
And me and them, we were not the same thing. It took years to build my body to be able to be competitive with those guys that showed up already being stellar athletes.
Yeah.
And it taught me the importance of it. And it taught me that this isn't something that you should do. If I want to be part of these high operating teams, I have to. It's not an option. It's a must. And so 18, 19 years old, I learned like, hey, if I don't invest a tremendous amount of time in this, I'm not going to be able to get where I want to be. And that forced me to start to put a lot of energy into training and exercise and how to get healthy and how to eat. And it snowballed from there. But I think about, man, if I was 18 and I didn't go down that path and I went and got a job at Amazon in a warehouse, what would have ever motivated me to have the necessity to do that? It probably would have never happened.
Sure.
And I mean, it's a blessing and it's a curse all at once because in the military, they're in your ass, you know? It's like, you're going to do this or else.
Yeah.
And it forces you to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And to this day, like yesterday, I went and almost blew my heart up on the stair climber upstairs.
I saw a photo.
Because I can go to that place now.
Yeah.
And while it's very uncomfortable, it's also familiar.
Yeah.
For people that place is not familiar, I don't know how to get them there. I don't, man. Jiu-jitsu will get you there.
Yeah.
But again, it's a it's a year-long process, even on the mats.
Well, surrendering the ego. And so like, why don't people do it? It's the ego. You know, I love that story, and I have a lot of similarity in that. Like, I didn't grow up playing sports. Like, I was, you know, we talked about like my upbringing. Like, I was growing up playing piano. That's what I was playing.
Does your culture, does that culture not put much of an emphasis on the physical body?
Not really. And that's kind of an interesting thing, right? Like, it wasn't encouraged. I didn't know a lot of friends that, you know, especially when I was in Memphis, where I was born, you know, a lot of ethnic groups kind of find each other, right? So there was a group of like our family friends were all, you know, second generation Chinese American. Very few of them really played sports. And so there just is such a push towards academia, not really on sports, which is kind of maybe ironic, right? To have a culture coming from like government overthrow and not have more ownership of every part of you, right?
Yeah.
Sharpening yourself. But really it was me, you know, I lifted weights in college, right? It was more like social hour. And so I wasn't super fit. You know, I was probably in decent shape considering how much beer I was drinking and the garbage food, right? But like, it wasn't until I became a cop where I was like, and I got stronger in college, but I was a pretty scrawny, shy kid for most of my life, right? And so when it got to police academy, and there's such a push on, I mean, it's mostly calisthenics, right? It's mostly push-ups and crunches and running, a lot of running back then. Now they don't do any, but that's a different story. You know, I was running a ton.
Insane is what it is.
So I just got lean, right? You're just running a lot. And once I got to the street, I was like, man, I need to get bigger. And so that was my own recognition. And I always tried to be introspective right through my life. And so I'm like, I need to take this seriously, right? The fight for life might be today. And so I got just way more into fitness. You know, one of my early goals was to be a canine officer, like a tracking dog handler, which I was able to accomplish. But with that, I was like, if I don't catch someone, I don't want it to be because of me. I want it to be because of environmental factors. I want it to be because he got in a car, not because, you know, he went over this ravine and into the sticker bushes or over 2 fences. Like, I want to be that. I want to get that guy.
I always used to say, man, like if someone starts to run from me, I don't care if it's 50 meters or 5 miles. If I get outran by a methamphetamine addict, I'm not holding the line as a police officer, right? Like, the thought of somebody outrunning me on patrol was like fucking would haunt me, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you see the video I posted a year or two ago of a foot pursuit?
Was it yours?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I'll show you after we're done recording.
Yeah.
But yeah, a notorious car thief in the area, and it turned into a foot chase with a bunch of cops, and I ended up fucking just Goldberg spearing this guy. It's like, at the port, you don't get to do that very often.
Yeah, that's like a really good one.
So it was exciting, you know?
No, but
yeah,
like,
it's important. And I think what you just said, and I tell cops all the time, man, it's like, the fight for your life might happen today. And by saying it might happen today, that's not like fear mongering, or it's reality.
It's just real. Yeah.
You absolutely are going to be putting your hands on people. And eventually, some of those people aren't going to comply with the words that you're saying. So now what? And if you don't think that that's reality, I don't think you should be in the profession. You know, I tell people all the time, I think even compliant cuffing is jujitsu. I'm putting my hands on your body and manipulating you in a certain way. And even if you're being compliant, I still have to understand how to take control of the situation, because statistically, that's when a lot of the fights happen.
Yeah,
they make that decision right as you're about to put handcuffs on. They're like, nope, fuck this. And so like I think about, if I were to go on patrol and not be fit and not understand how to grapple, I would be nervous.
Yeah. And I think that's, so going back, like what will make people that don't partake in any level of fitness or training, man, I think it's so hard to move that rock, right? To get any momentum out of that boulder, because to get that officer in, they have to check so much ego to be like, not only am I not in a good place right now, but I've been negligent for years and years, right? Like, they've been rolling the dice every single day, and their families probably see them rolling the dice every single day, but do they acknowledge it? And that's a terrifying thing to, you know, that's a terrifying place to be. So not to judge or shame, but like,
but
we
when
got to
you-
get them past it.
when you start on that journey, something I get as a coach all the time is guys will come, they'll join the team, and their first night or two, they just look defeated, sitting in the corner. A lot of times their heads between their hands. And I'll always go talk to them, be like, hey, what's going through your mind right now? And they're like, dude, I just got beat up by a 14-year-old boy, man. Like, I didn't realize what this is or what this was. I didn't realize I was this deficient. I didn't realize I was this incapable. And I think it takes that moment for a lot of people, because it's easy to just tell yourself a lie and live in a lie. But when you're confronted, I tell people all the time, the mats don't show you who you are. They show you who you aren't. Because a lot of people have a misconception of who they are. And you go confront that, you see who you aren't, and you go one of two ways. You say, I got some things I have to address, or some people are like, I don't want to feel that anymore, and I'm out of here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's a long commitment to be able to become comfortable in the realm of discomfort and then incorporate the grind as just part of your life. And again, like you said, like, what is the mechanism to get officers to do that? I don't fucking know what it is, man. A part of saying, hey, like, if you want to be a police officer, these are the standards, and have literal like Army Ranger standards and have the job pay $500K a year.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you
like,
get what you pay for
that
to some degree.
That might work. But with the funding available, and it's not feasible. It might be feasible if we didn't send all of our money to Ukraine and whatnot.
Yeah, but what about like mandatory, right? So, you know, you have workout time, and then you have mandatory gym time. Like, we have session training, or, you know, kind of block training for defensive tactics, but that's usually like, you know, an hour, a couple hours for a year.
Yeah.
That's not enough.
Well, and bro, something I used to say, I've said this on the podcast a lot too, when we were teaching blocks of instruction at the port, and it's literally 2 blocks of instruction a year. And it's like, this is how you shrimp your hips out. And everyone's like, what the fuck does shrimping have to do with fighting? Well, if you would just listen to me, you'd learn that it's about angles, and angles are everything in fighting.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're wrestling, if you're doing jiu-jitsu, if you're doing Muay Thai, boxing, angles win fights. But you can't even begin to understand that concept with 2 hours of training a year. So I used to say to the guys, I'd be like, hey, who knows who Conor McGregor is? And everybody laughs and raises their hand. Yeah, it's like, okay, when he's going into a title fight, who here thinks that he trained 2 hours that year? And everybody laughs because that's stupid, right? And I said, and I get that that'd be a stupid concept to train 2 hours for a championship fight. I said, but here's the ironic thing. His fight is sanctioned. There's a rule set, and there's a referee that's going to pull the guy off him if it goes bad. Your guys' stakes are way fucking higher. Statistically, you want to look at who gets hurt worse, professional MMA fighters or police officers. And you guys chose this route, and you want to put no training in. What are we talking about? But it never motivated anyone. What I would see consistently, and Muse will tell you the same thing, it was like, hey, I'm going to show up to work today early and do 2 hours of grappling. Everybody's welcome. And guess what it'd be? It'd be me and Muse and Barros. Do you know Barros?
No.
Another black belt.
It's like the same
Another
couple
black belt.
people, yeah.
And Levengood, and like a handful of guys that already love grappling and that are already very proficient.
Right.
And they just want to get a little better.
Yeah.
That's not who needs to be attending.
Exactly.
Don't get me wrong, like, keep training, right? But that's when you put that out to the department, it's like, dude, I need the guys that know nothing to start to build a foundation. I don't need the toughest dudes in the department to get a little tougher.
Right.
And again, like, it would never grow legs. It would never take off. And
that's the crazy thing. If you had someone that was completely inexperienced go to a session like that twice a month, how much better and capable and confident would they be, right? And
yeah.
So my takeaway is, as I explained, like, I got really into fitness and nutrition through the job to try to enhance performance, but ground fighting was something that I didn't want to dabble with, right? It was always kind of like poking at me. It was like something I felt like I had to do, but truly it was like ego and just, hey, you have a bunch of excuses, right? You'll always have a ton of excuses. And it wasn't until last year that I joined a gym when I had so many questions, because they're like, dude, you're in your late 30s, you're working a desk, you're in hiring, like, you're not even really on the street, and you might be a commander soon. So like, really, what's the point? And I was like, I've been putting a lot of reasons, but I've been putting it off long enough that I ought to do this. And so I did. And although I'm not currently doing it, like I recognize from going for a few months on and off between injuries, and that's my own ego, right? Like trying to hold my own against 20-something-year-olds, right? But I realized just after a few weeks how much more everything made sense, right? Everything that I'd been learning and hearing for years, to your point, shrimping, I was like, I don't know why we do this, right? But then when you shrimp across the mat for warm-ups and then you're in different positions and you're like, this makes so much sense now, right? And then I attended, when I was the training sergeant at the time, I attended some of the DT just to be like, hey, I'm not here to train. I'm here to talk about officer safety. If I see something, with some of these recruits, because you have the room full of recruits and I'm just another guy, and I'll be the training dummy. I'll be whatever you need. But I was actually able to explain a lot of things so well that I would not have been able to explain after 15 years of policing, because I just did a little bit of jiu-jitsu, right? So I don't know anything, but like that little nothing was so much better than 15 years of going to just your basic defensive tactics.
Well, and I tell people often, like, in the land of the blind, he with one eye is king, right? Like, you don't have to have great grappling to outperform 99% of people. And if you would commit a year to learning to fight, that's going to serve you the rest of your law enforcement career. So it's like, even if you hated it, it's like, man, I hate fighting. I don't like how it feels. I don't like the environment. I don't like this team. Like, whatever you don't like about it, maybe put that on the back burner and say, I'm going to commit a year to it. It'd be like saying, like, I don't like shooting, so I don't need to, I don't need to shoot ever, which, I mean, I said that as a joking analogy, but how many cops don't shoot either?
Yeah. And so simple, you talk about, for those listening, like dry fire, and I'm not going to say like I'm better than anyone, because I'm not. Like, I'm actually quite the opposite. Like, it's something that I have to consciously do. But I notice something as simple as like academy, when they're like, hey, if you want to get better at shooting, just practice your draw and dry fire, just a little bit every day, a little bit every week, like whatever your level is, right? And there's times in my career where I fell way away from that, and my shooting was garbage, right?
Yeah.
There's times that I was like, no, I should just make this part of my thing, just pull the pistol out, make it safe, and like, even in the middle of my workout, right, as I'm resting or catching my breath, okay, cool, I'm huffing and puffing, try to level up those sights, like, shot way better, right? Even without getting into the range, just going in cold in the quals.
The best shooters in the world dry fire more than they live fire. That's a resource that's always available. And really, like my buddy Lappin says, who runs the range portion of some of the programs that we run, he's like, dude, don't think that, hey, I have to dedicate an hour to this, or like I have to go to the range 3 days a week. Like, you can literally say, I'm going to do 10 draws and 10 dry fires a night, which takes you 2 minutes, right? So if you can allocate, I mean, I challenge everybody, and I'm as guilty as anybody, but pull your phone out and look at your screen time from yesterday.
Oh my God, yeah.
And tell me you didn't have 2 minutes to dry fire your gun. And consistency is what's key. And if you start to build consistency into these routines with fitness, with running, with jiu-jitsu, with dry firing, you start to become like the whole package a lot sooner than you would think.
Yeah.
But still, like, and that's, do you know what 75 Hard is? Have you heard of that program? That's why I think that's so key, because it teaches you to fall into routines.
Yeah.
You need routines. And bro, when I don't have routines, I fall apart fast. And it's tough, man. And it's interesting because some of my routines, like when it comes to fitness and working out and clean eating, that's been a routine for so long that it's not really that challenging to continue. But when it's like, hey, I need to write a chapter in my book. Hey, I need to read this much, or I need to allocate this much time to my business. I fucking drop the ball all the time still.
Yeah.
It's just because it's tough.
It's probably such to the point where, it was hard for me to get into working out, but then it became a thing where, my wife could set for years. If I didn't have a workout that day, I was a mess to be around. Like, I was irritable. And it was just out of sorts, right? Like, you don't think as clearly. And so you recognize by instilling these habits, not only does it become easier, it becomes hard not to, which is amazing.
Well, and one thing I always find interesting is if you're into fitness and you're lean and you're muscular and you're in shape, like, there's the meathead connotation, and science proves otherwise. the higher functioning your body is, it correlates to higher brain function too. And we're shocked.
Yeah.
You know,
it makes sense. Like you're literally shuttling nutrients, better nutrients, because you're putting more fuel, like quality fuel in your body. And then with your heart and all your organs working synonymously and like synchronistically, like that's going to be better for your brain, motor function. Like, it sounds, it's hard to dispute, right?
I got a lot of, when my video went viral, a lot of haters that were like, oh, why should we listen to you? You're some fucking gym bro meathead. And it's like,
which video?
The when I left the port.
Okay, that one.
Yeah, that one. And they're like trying to say that with like a derogatory undertones, and I'm like, hey, cool, man.
Yeah.
Like,
I recently got a comment like, oh, Officer bro, and I was like, I'll take that as a compliment,
Yeah.
Because it's so weird. It's so weird that that's a thing.
No, and we've normalized, like, if you're 40 pounds overweight and you're eating at McDonald's and you're a police officer, that's normal now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's not Officer bro.
Yeah. You should take it as a compliment. And it's so crazy that would be, I mean, there's all these movements, right, where it's like, no, I'm just happy. It's like, are you? Right? I'm just however I look is fine. It's truly, I do want people to live the way they want, which I think most cops could, agree with. But
yeah, but bro, like, and I got really high last night and had this epiphany, which you can't partake in yet.
I cannot partake, but I'm curious.
And I realized, like, and I was listening to all these politicians, just different clips on social media, and they're all talking about how we're going to make your life better here. We're going to make your life better there. And I'm going to do this for you. And it's like, man, if everybody would just stop chasing happiness, because, dude, life isn't happy. Life is fucking hard. And once you just embrace that there's ebbs and flows, there's peaks and valleys, and it doesn't matter who the fuck your president is, who the fuck your governor is. Sometimes you're going to be really happy, and sometimes you're going to feel like absolute dog shit. And if you can just accept that that is the natural cycle of your life, you can put that fucking dream of just chasing happiness and fucking throw in the dumpster, because that's not reality. We're always going to have to overcome tragedy and hardships, and like that's the human experience. And I was telling my wife last night, I was like, if I ever run for president, I'm going to run on the platform like, I'm not here to make your fucking life better. That's not what I'm here to do. I am here to run this government under the restrictions of the Constitution and respect your rights and protect your rights. But your happiness and your success, that's on fucking you.
Yeah.
That ain't on me. And what we find is people want to outsource their happiness to all these different people. And motherfucker, it's you.
Yeah.
You got to look in the mirror and you have to figure out the path to happiness. Because if so-and-so gets elected and cuts your taxes by 8%. Oh, dude, we're paying too much. This guy's going to cut my taxes. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of taxes. But I promise you, if you're not happy before and you get an 8% cut, you're not going to be happy afterwards. That's not the thing that's driving your life. You're driving your life.
Yeah.
And all of these people in leadership positions just want to push all these like illusions of grandeur. And people get wrapped up in that, and that ain't the fucking answer, man.
Yeah, I think people are conflating, and whether we even recognize it, like the difference between happiness and being like pacified, right?
Yeah,
like, you can stick a pacifier in a baby's mouth, but are they being nourished? Are they being fed? Like they have the illusion of being fed, or you can put a tablet in front of like a kid, but like that's not engagement, right? That's just occupation, right? Like that's just mental occupation. But like you could be with your kid and having a fun, silly conversation, right? Making faces, making silly fart noises. And that's actually building on your relationship, right? Like you're actually having a connection. And so I think it's very much the same, right? Like, we talk about being distracted by all these things, but some people want to be distracted, right? They want to be distracted from the lack of agency they have, the lack of ownership they have, whether it's cops or civilians and all these things, right?
It's all the same.
Yeah.
A lot of people, for sure. But it's like you said a minute ago, you're like, hey, if I don't get my workout in, my wife notices. And the same thing. My wife used to be like, I'd be talking to her when I lived in Los Angeles. I'd get off work and give her a call, and she could just feel my demeanor based on how the day went. And she'd be like, hey, make sure you go to jiu-jitsu on your way home.
You just pent up or?
Just, you know, so you can just feel it in me. Make sure you go to jiu-jitsu tonight. Don't come home without going to the gym first.
Yeah.
And that's not like your wife being a fucking bitch to you. That's the absolute opposite.
Oh, she's looking. She cares about you.
know?
She's in tune with you.
But in order to find like contentness inside of you, man, you have to go feel some pain. You have to go grind a little bit. And even to this day, when I'm in the moment, when I'm in the grind, I don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, dude, when your heart rate's at 170 and you can't breathe, it's not like, yes, this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
It's not. It's the moment afterwards when you're like, this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And there's no way to get that unless you go through the pain.
You got to pay.
You got to pay, man.
Yeah.
And that's just the natural cycle of the universe that we live in. And that's where you have to become content with things kind of being shitty, you know?
Yeah.
And I know this is going to sound kind of nuts, but in my brain, the harder I push, like I like to watch my heart rate and feel like my respiration rate. And I just tell myself, dude, I'm just a machine and I'm just needing more gas. And when you want to go from 40 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour and you push the gas on your car just a little more, there's nothing sad about that.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just making this machine run at a little higher RPM. And I try and tell myself that. It's like the physical body is just the machine. Let's just fucking rev it up and see what we can do with it.
Yeah.
And don't attach your emotions to it, you know? Because if you start feeling sorry for yourself, man, that's where the wheels fall off.
Well, that's all mindset, right? That's framing. So someone else in the position would be like, oh man, my heart's going to explode. That's going to create this stress. Whereas like you're creating this eustress. You're like, hey man, this is uncomfortable, but discomfort's good, right? Like, true, not to sound cheesy, like you can't experience joy unless you experience sorrow.
100%.
And then, like
dude.
the worst sorrow you feel, like not to disparage anyone that's been in that worst place, but if they come out of it, man, they're gonna have that scale is really expanded, right? Like I feel, it sounds so weird, right? Like I feel so fortunate for my hardest times, right? I almost got killed in duty, but I had this elation and this higher recognition of my interaction with life because of that, right? Lost my buddy Diego at work, right?
Yeah, I saw that. I saw the bracelet you're wearing, man.
I appreciate it. And I think about life so differently because of it, because of his loss and because of my relationship with him, right?
Yeah.
A lot of our friends do.
And that was, I mean, I was with the port when that happened. What year was that again? Like 2019? 18?
Yeah.
And got struck while putting a spike strip on the road.
Yeah.
Which is actually not that uncommon.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous part of high-speed pursuits.
Yeah.
And I didn't know him, but a lot of the Valley SWAT guys did. Was he on the Valley SWAT team?
He was a negotiator, right?
Okay, because I remember Muse and Levingood and
interaction.
stuff. They knew him. I didn't remember if he was on the team or not.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, like, and I experienced moments like that in the military where it's like everything's good one moment, and then a life-altering occurrence happens with no heads up, like, and then you got to go and revisit all those whys and coulda, shoulda, wouldas and stuff, and it's like a lot of growth comes from dark times.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, was he? How long was he on the department for?
I want to say he was on for about 7 to 10 years.
Okay.
7 to 9.
Long time.
I want to say in there. Yeah, at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we were on the same crew, and yeah, there was a really tight-knit group of guys where, you know, we were at each other's weddings, bachelor parties. We'd go do trips, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a closeness that we took for granted. But, you know, when we had the service and a lot of our outside agency buddies would kind of come by because he was on, you know, the CDU team also. It was like regional stuff. They'd be like, man, you guys hung out a lot outside of work. We're like, oh, we were, you know, some of our best friends for sure.
Yeah. No, and I mean, inevitably any agency you work for, you're going to find those 3, 4, 5 guys that you just click with.
Yeah.
You know? Do you maintain much social activity outside of the circle of law enforcement?
I do. And a lot of that's forced. And that might sound weird.
I think it's important, bro.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah,
and that's why I asked, because you've been on for 17 years. You've been on almost twice as long as I was on. So you see this probably at every level, but a lot of cops start to become isolated as cops.
Yeah.
And that's another reason I'm an advocate for jiu-jitsu. Because some of the guys that you spend your evenings with are probably guys you put cuffs on at some point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Immerse yourself in parts of the community outside of the bubble of law enforcement, because inevitably when you hang out with cops, you start to talk about cop things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying there's a problem with that, but there needs to be a balance to it as well.
There is a problem with that if it's all the time.
That's what I'm saying. If it's all the time.
So luckily it's being more socialized. Like I remember they said even back in academy when I came through, like live outside the blue world, but people would say it and then not really knew what it meant, or maybe not really like expand upon that. But you know, when I say forced, if any of my non-cop friends are listening, they're gonna be like, "What the hell, man?
You just hang out with me because..."
Yeah, no. But it's like, and when I say forced, it's like, no, that is a non-negotiable, like intentional thing. I know that there are years where you talk about cop stuff all the time, it becomes pretty dark, right? There's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of trauma, a lot of things you see or feel, and it's not sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah, and bro, it's not what I've noticed. It's not only like, hey man, this call that I went to and like some dark story. A lot of times it's just bitching about command staff and shit like that. And it's like, dude, we're at my house for a UFC party. Who gives a fuck about what Commander so-and-so did?
Yeah.
Like that shit shouldn't be welcome right here.
Yeah.
But inevitably that stuff always surfaces because that's the life that you live together.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think we started talking about identity, right? Like that overinvestment of identity, whether it's like, it's not just like you're looking at all cop videos and you're buying all this like cop swag and like 511 and everything and Oakley's, but like
thin blue line stickers everywhere and your hat and like,
oh man, yeah. It's not just that, but it's just like we're not just cops. We need to be people. And to your point, like if you're engaging in an activity like jujitsu, or you're hanging out with other dads or what have you, right? People that you went to school with, or people that you used to work this old job with, or your neighbors, right? You're just catching up, you know, from cutting grass. You're like, I have felt in these times where I'm like, they don't get me. I can't relate to these conversations, so I need to, right? It's even another twist on like being uncomfortable, right? And so we need to just kind of be dads sometimes. We need to just be men, just hanging out in the neighborhood sometimes.
Something I've seen in Rangers and soldiers is when their identity becomes that, and then that is put in the rearview mirror, that is the catalyst to a lot of the mental health problems.
Yeah.
Because you put yourself on this pedestal where you thought like, this was the highlight of my life. I was an Army Ranger in the Battle of Fallujah. And you wear those campaign hats, and 20 years later, that is still people's highlights. And that's something I've been very aware of, because I've had 6 teammates commit suicide since the wars. The majority of them were about 10 years post-war. So you give about a decade outside of that environment, and they're still chasing that side of who they used to be, and then they just spiral out of control. And it's like, dude, I honestly think the only way for people that try and identify who they are with their profession to not allow that to ever sink its teeth in is we have to believe, dude, the best version of myself is in the future. The biggest things that I'm going to contribute to society, the biggest things that I'm going to do for my family, the biggest things I'm going to do for myself professionally and in my career hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
And you have to believe that too. You can't just tell yourself that story and try and like pull the wool over your own eyes. It's like, that's true. Like, how old are you?
38.
38. So I'm 43. We're not that far apart. And statistically, most people find the most success in their lives from 40 to 50.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, dude, I'm just starting to get the wheels moving on this new chapter of my life, and it's exciting. And I'll tell you the truth, though. One thing that worries me is a lot of what I am and who I am is rooted in physicality. A lot of, like, we've been talking about training and jiu-jitsu and stuff the whole time. Man. When I hit fucking 65 and the wheels, and I can't do this stuff anymore, I know that's going to be a tough position to face.
Yeah.
But then I have to tell myself the same thing. Well, that phase of my life is behind me. Now I'm going to have to move on to the next thing, and it's going to be more rewarding than anything I've done.
Yeah.
And maybe it's being a fucking yogi in the mountains in India somewhere. You know what I'm saying?
You say that, and, you know, I was talking about how my brief encounter with jiu-jitsu and being hurt, and that's my next thing is I had a couple first responder yoga instructors on my show, and I was like, man, if I was going to put a wall up and be uncomfortable with something, that like my wife has made fun of me when I try to do yoga poses next to her. You're just at home, and she's
Yeah.
just like, no, and she'll correct my posture, and I'll fall over because the mobility and the flexibility and the balance, and it's like that's really hard, you know.
Well,
and so like if I was to check my ego, which I already told her as accountability, so now I'm telling a lot of people like I'm going to sign up for the local yoga
Hell yeah, dude.
studio. I don't know if it's this week or next week, but it will happen.
No, and the reason I say that, it wasn't just like tongue in cheek. I think a lot about this because you know what the biggest indicator of longevity in the human body is? It's not your bench press. It's not your mile time. It's
Your
your
grip strength?
well, that's actually a good one too.
It's a good,
Yeah, that's a good one
Yeah,
too.
Tia, I think, talked about that.
But it's mobility.
Mm.
A lot of people can't sit on the ground and then stand back up.
Yeah.
Not in your culture.
Shout out to
You know what I'm saying?
Japanese,
Yeah,
like
that's what I was
laying on
gonna
their
say.
mats. Yeah, that's the thing. Or they fall better, like
Yeah.
because it's not everyone falls. Old
Or
people
like-
fall.
I make my kids, the kids class, do a mobility routine, and it includes like the deep squat. The deep squat should be a rest position,
Yeah,
and if it's not,
I love it.
it's because you've allowed your hips and your knees and everything to get too bound up from sitting in chairs your whole life.
Yeah.
You know, you go to any third world country, anywhere in the Middle East, and they
Yep.
can squat all the way down and
Yep.
rest in that position.
Yeah,
And then Americans, our
I
bodies,
do it when I brew coffee every morning.
Yeah,
yeah.
dude.
It's like body weight squats, and I
Yep.
just sit there and just kind of wake up. Yeah,
and half the kids who are 10, 11, 12 years old will fall backwards.
really
And
that
it's
young.
like, fuck, man.
Yeah,
You guys are neglecting your body. But I also love yoga. Like, there's something that happens when you're doing yoga it's very physical, but it's also almost like a form of meditation.
hmm
And the only reason that I don't allocate a lot of time to it is because I'm always doing this stuff,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And so I already know, it's like, you know, a lot of people will tell you, I'm going to do jujitsu for the rest of my life. I'm not going to.
yeah.
Like, I know fighting other people has an expiration date, and that's okay.
Well, I love how, you know, it's called murder yoga, or it's called I heard
Yeah.
it called what was it? Shoot, I'm spacing, but yeah, to that point, like
Folding
that's,
laundry with people in it, that one.
no, it's it was part of what drew me towards it, right? In my late 30s, I was like, you know what? It's something I could do for the rest of my life. You see a lot of older men and women doing it, and yeah, let's go for it. And then right away, like I'm in these classes with these early 20-year-olds, and I'm like, I'm holding my own because of my gas tank.
Yeah.
I'm decently flexible, but yeah, outside of that, like I'm getting rocked, right?
Well, and that's
humbled, but
and
it
that's
was
the
great.
thing that I believe. You know, there's academies that their slogans like, let's keep it playful, right? And like, let's just have fun. And don't get me wrong, you can come to my gym any night of the week and you're gonna see 40 people with smiles on their faces. Like, people are having fun here. They love the culture. But the culture is also, we train hard.
Mm.
And when we slap and bump, I'm gonna try and beat you. And you know, a lot of academies say, check your ego at the door. I say, don't check your ego at the door, check in with your ego.
Mm.
Because you have to bring your ego on the mats,
Yeah, awareness,
because
that's good.
I'm trying to win against you. And you're going to use your physicality and your knowledge to try and beat me. If I were to check my ego at the door, then that means like, oh, win, lose, I don't care. Like,
Resigning.
do whatever you want to me.
Yeah.
Fuck no.
Yeah.
And I think that's where jiu-jitsu comes alive, is like, and it's a very, very delicate balance, because if we go out there and we train and you catch me in a choke and I have to tap to you, I'm at a place in my life, I'm not going to be upset about that. I'm going to shake your hand. I'm going to be proud of you. And I'm going to tell you that. I actually will tell, when we do our bow out at the end of class, if a lower belt catches me, I'll usually bring it up to kind of like congratulate that person, you
that's
know?
good.
But I also don't like it. You know what I mean? Like, in my own mind, it's like, well, what did I fuck up? Why did that happen?
Yeah.
And I think you have to be able to balance it to where I can analyze it and I can be dissatisfied, but it shouldn't cause any type of anger.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I mean, one of my toughest black belts, I love the dude. He's the toughest dude in the gym, but when he loses, he's fucking not happy. But that's also what makes certain people monsters too.
Yeah,
so it's a balance, right?
It's the chip on their shoulder that feeds them, and that's why I love stoicism, because it's not to say like don't have feelings. It's like, no, just be in tune with your feelings, recognize it, and then focus on what you can control. So your locus of control, and so for your friend, it's like, okay, I'm I'm pissed and I am motivated and I'm going to take this and turn it into something I can control, which is to train harder and study, whatever it is, right? I remember what it was. It's the gentle art.
Okay, yeah,
right?
yeah, the gentle
I was like,
art.
nothing gentle about this,
that
man.
Ain't
Like
fucking gentle,
yeah,
bro.
I'm just trying to like warm up, like doing like shoulder rolls like over the mat, and I'm like, I feel like I'm gonna concuss myself. But
do you know who Andy Alien is by chance?
I don't think so.
He's one of my brown belts. He'll be my first white through black belt. And he is the chief of police in Mukilteo.
Okay.
And I got my first rolls last night. I just had hernia surgery, and yesterday was 8 weeks. The surgeon said 8 weeks you can grapple.
Man.
So
you didn't push it. You listened.
Oh, dude, I listened.
Good for you.
He scared me.
Good for
he
you.
told me, he goes, I know what guys like you are like. He goes, in 5 weeks, you're not going to feel any pain, and you're going to say, I'm different, and I heal faster, and I'm ready to go. And then you're going to go, and you're going to rip the mesh off of your abdominal wall, and we're going to have to go redo the entire surgery, and you're going to start healing the healing clock back to day one.
Man.
He goes, so please listen to me.
So real talk.
I was like, all right, I'm gonna listen.
Yeah.
But sure as shit, dude, it's been 8 weeks off the mats, and I slap and bump with Andy, and we're here to kill each other.
So you went full bore. It wasn't any no shallow end.
Full bore, dude. Yeah. And he's a brown belt, and he's tough as shit. And it was funny afterwards. He's like, that didn't go. He goes, I wanted to get you on your first day back. And it didn't go how I thought it was going to go for me.
Yeah. No, I love your recognition about the physicality, and especially someone like myself. I did get really proud of my advancement, right? Like I was able to deadlift quite a bit just off of getting into it, right?
Yeah.
And just like being able to like strength train and then make that a part of my life, and then recognizing at a certain point, like, okay, I'm not getting faster. I'm getting slower, right? Like my sprint is slowly deteriorating, but then for a long time, that recognition that, hey, you won't have this body forever, it's scary, right? Especially if you,
I struggle with that a little bit. Yeah. If a lot, I just talked about how don't allow your identity to be who you were as far as a cop or as a soldier. But I do know a big part of my identity is rooted in physicality.
Yeah.
And I also know that that's going to go. Yeah. And it's starting to.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I think at 43, I can still perform it almost as high a level as I ever did when it comes to like maybe a scored test, a run time, a bench press. But what I notice is like, bro, I'm like a fucking Neanderthal for the first 2 hours every morning. Get up and the back's tight and I have to stretch and walk down the stairs a little differently. And like all those little things, it's like, fuck, man. Yeah. In another 10 years, what's this going to look like?
Yeah. It's ego again, right? For me, like for a while, I would just, and I had it written down, I'd write down my lifts, right? And the deadlift was the last one to go as far as the one that I was willing to like say, hey, I'm going to like not do this. For me, bench pressing, like I got long apish arms. And so I'm not built for bench, but I got up to a point where I maxed out with all the reps, right? The elbow reps, the wrist reps. And then this was years and years ago, but I was like, what are you doing, dude? You're not even competing. So like, stop. And then, so I checked that, right? But then to literally force myself, I was like, let's play this out. If I keep doing this and I'm grinding, my form's starting to falter, like for what purpose? Like I'm not, what, why? And so to actually like getting ready for a move, I recently moved like about a month ago. Like I started selling weights. Like that was the first thing I got rid of. But then it was hard to do, honestly, but it was liberating because I was like, there's no reason why you need to retain this much weight.
Yeah.
Right? Just sell it for a few 45s. And then if you don't deadlift more than like 225 at home, like it's okay.
Bro, it's funny you say that because deadlift was perpetually the lift that would throw my back out.
Yeah.
And I think deadlift is one of the overall best lifts for just overall strength, right? It works almost every part of your body. And when you're strong as fucking deadlifts, you just feel like a motherfucker.
I feel like you conquer.
Yeah, it's just like, dude, I am a powerful fucking wild animal. And I would throw my back out. And then people would be like, oh, because it's a form thing. And it's like, well, I have pretty good form and I'm still throwing my back out. And so I did the same thing. With a deadlift, I set the limit at 225. I said, I guess I can't go more than this.
Yeah. And I don't trust myself.
And I did that for years, bro, until I bought a trap bar.
Yeah.
And people will say the trap bar's cheating or whatever, but
It's different.
it's different.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is when you're doing traditional deads, the weight is obviously in front of you.
So far forward, yeah.
And it's just far enough forward that it gives me back issues. And you back that up with the trap bar, and now you're right over your base.
Yeah.
And bro,
It's right in line with your spine. It makes total
I can
sense.
lift.
Yeah.
I mean, I've fucking went up to like mid 4s with that thing.
Yeah.
Zero pain.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the trap bar. You want to still work heavy. But the other side, I never want to go heavier than probably 400 pounds. What's the point of that? Look at Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah.
You watched his documentary, dude?
Yep.
The dude can't even walk anymore.
Right.
And you know, like you look at dudes like Ronnie Coleman or Hickson Gracie, whose bodies are just shot now, but they also built a legacy and built probably generational wealth around what they did and what they accomplished. That's cool, right?
It is, yeah.
Hey, you can't walk anymore, but you were 8-time Mr. Olympia and your grandkids are probably taken care of. Unless he just pissed all his money away. I don't know what he did.
Yeah, I don't know.
But for you and I, a 700-pound deadlift is not going to build a legacy.
No.
It's not going to help our children.
No.
The only thing it's going to do is fuck you up.
Yep. And then hurt your family, hurt your legacy, right? Because like you still got to move around. Like that's my work. That's your work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, what is it all for? And I think that's where it's important. Like, it's great to have these goals, but then like in the big scheme of things, what is the mission? And that's, that goes into, a lot of our earlier conversations. Like, what is the purpose of this?
Yeah.
And I love your thing, right? Like to recognize that your glory days, I like joking about glory days, but I truly want to believe that my glory days are now.
Yeah.
And now is constantly changing, to your point. Like it should be the future. And if we're honest with ourselves, I think most of us, especially anyone listening to this, they are into self-development. They're into community, family development, team development. So you probably, if you're honest with yourself and you're inclusive to the whole picture, you're probably in a much better place than you would have thought you'd be in 5-10 years ago. Like I certainly am.
Yeah.
Like even to be a cop, right? I resigned so many things in my life to be like, I was having a conversation on my show recently about this, but like, you sign up to be a cop, you're like, oh, I'm never going to make more than X amount of money. And I'm never going to have, the type of flexibility of my schedule. I might have some pretty crappy relationships. I might have a divorce. You tell yourself all these things based off of statistics, but man, like how much are you limiting yourself by even acknowledging that you could just deny, like, no, there's no effing way that I'm going to get, I'm going to sacrifice my relationship with my kids because of my job. And if that's the goal, if there's a time when that's not right, then the job needs to go.
Yeah.
Right?
No, and again, we talked about that a little bit right before we pushed record, but the priority in your life can't be the job.
Right.
It can't be. And I've seen a lot of cops, and I'm sure you see it too, that have put in 10, 12, 16 years, and now they're done. Emotionally, physically, they're done.
Yep.
But they're like, hey, I got 4 more years till retirement. And it's like, at some point, I got to agree with people. Like, I understand if you put 19 and a half years in and in 6 months I get full retirement, I'm going to grind those 6 months, right?
Yeah.
But are you willing to grind 6 years? Like, I don't know what the right answer is, but one thing that I tell cops often is like, if your heart's not in it anymore, because this is something that I get a lot of emails from as police officers that are disgruntled or they want to move on, but they feel trapped. They feel like they don't have any other options. Yeah. And it's like, dude, you can go drive for UPS and make more money than you can as a police officer.
Yeah.
So if you're only in it for the money, you can go do things that have a lot less like psychological fucking baggage.
You'd probably be more active. You're getting out of your truck. You can run up those you see sometimes those Amazon drivers like running up the driveway.
Yeah,
I'm
dude.
like, hell yeah,
They're
man.
They're getting
like,
workouts in.
I love it. Yeah.
And the other thing is like, you don't owe, I tell cops all the time, you don't owe anybody anything.
Yeah.
If you did the job for 2 years, fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah, I'm into that.
You don't owe anybody anything. And I've even had some reach out to me with like disdain. That's like, I can't believe you abandoned the profession in 2020. And it's like, oh, that's how you look at this.
Yeah.
Because it's not an us versus them team. It's something that you do as employment. And don't get me wrong, your employment can have other benefits to your life other than just the financial benefits. They can be fulfilling, and it can give you a sense of duty and purpose, all that stuff. But when you don't feel that anymore, walking away is okay.
Yeah.
And I think walking away for a lot of cops is something that should never be like off the table, because this is our one life, dude.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's going to be way more common now, right? I saw, I think it was PERF, like Police Executive Research Forum or something, that put out the stat that the average new cop is, or the average tenure of a cop is like 3 to 5 years. And that might be increasing. That might consider all the really quick attrition, through training, FTO.
Yeah.
But still, like, maybe we need to plan for that. And I like your notion, right? If you did 2 years, cool. There's a lot of people in the military that did 4 years. Did they quit on the country? No, like, thank you for, we should be like, thank you for your service, what you're willing to do, what most people don't. If you're a a school counselor, or like you work at a community center and for like 3 years, did you quit on the community? Did you not, are you a bad person because you don't still work at the YMCA your whole life?
Yeah, no, you're right, dude.
It's just a thing.
Yeah, and it's weird how in almost any other profession, hey, I'm gonna move on, I'm gonna do something different, people congratulate it,
Yeah.
If you're an Amazon driver and you say, you know what, hey, I just got my real estate agent license, I'm gonna become a commercial real estate agent. You're giving up on deliveries, like that doesn't exist. But in policing, there is, and again, there's obvious reasons to that, is because there is much more of an emotional toll and a connection and stuff to the profession.
Yeah.
But fuck, for me, man, I feel like a new person every like 5 years.
Yeah.
And I need something new.
Yeah.
I need something that's gonna excite me and challenge me. And it's like, jiu-jitsu has kind of been a consistent for the last 20 years. But while I've been doing a lot of other things, and I look at it like, dude, this is my life. I tell my team all the time, I'm going to go sail the world. So one day you're going to come here and I'm fucking gone.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, no, bullshit. Like,
Yeah,
I need to get my black belt under you. It's like, no, cool. Like, I'll be here until I'm not. But I'm just telling you, like, my life is not going to be on those mats behind you for the next 30 years. I got other shit to do.
Yeah. That's good. It's like you're evolving.
That's what we're supposed to be doing.
We should be new people, right? People are like, oh, you've changed. Like, I mean, there's a negative connotation there, but like, we should be changing. We should be challenging. And, there was a recent thing when, when I promoted, being in my late 30s, like I still got, we do that timeline, like to get to 53.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, man, are you going to be chief? I was like, I don't know. Like maybe, but maybe not. Probably not.
Yeah.
I never wanted to. And now you're closer, so you have to think about it sometimes. But honestly, doing things like this would probably make me like less marketable to some communities, right? Some
Dude,
places.
we behaved ourselves
I
today.
think so. No, but like to that point, that's all based off of a limited mindset, right?
Yeah.
To say like, oh man, don't promote too early. And I've heard mentors, everyone says that, right? Like if you promote too early, you're going to run out of things to do. I'm like, in these constraints, sure, at this city, it's like assistant chief, deputy chief, but who's to say that has to be my path? Like, I don't know. I truly don't know. And I'm not trying to be like, trying to say something like flashy, but like, I don't know if I have 2 years or 20 years, left, in this job. I don't know, but I want to be open to
We
things.
can't consider him for chief because when he did the Endless Endeavor podcast, he said he might leave in 2
right?
years.
Well, or the fact that I associated with you, right? You know what I mean? Like it's that
Yeah.
thing, but like I started a podcast a year ago and I just wanted to, you had a lot of frustration. So you put your voice out. Right. And so similarly in 2020, I was on my own personal social media saying things about, hey, being a cop, and this is how most cops are. Here's what most cops are frustrated with, but we're like, most of us are here for you and for each other. And I got a lot of positive feedback from people that kind of wrote me off because I was a cop, like, or they didn't know I was a cop.
What's your podcast called?
It's called Blue Grit Radio.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I got on social media and started Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram first to be like, hey, this is just me. I'm a cop. I'm not working undercover. So I felt like I could,
you can put yourself out there a little
put
bit.
myself out there. And so,
Well, bro, let me ask you this, because this is something that's always frustrated me about police officers is when I made my video, and again, that was just my opinion and I was putting it out there.
yeah.
But in the lunchroom, fucking everybody shared my opinion. Everybody.
Yeah.
Like every single person that I worked with didn't like the way things were going, didn't like the way we were being demonized, didn't like the way we were being, like how the profession was being sold to society. but everybody's also very reluctant to say anything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, guys, we're members of the community first. Like we should, and that's why it was an easy decision for me is like, if I can't talk about how I feel, I know that this is, and even my own fucking commander and my chief were like, Greg, I agree with what you said. That's not the issue is we just can't say things like that. And I was like, oh, okay. It's time for me to go then. Yeah. When my bosses are telling me we agree with you, but we can't say that. And to me, that's sad that the majority of our profession feels like I can't say how I feel because it might upset this person, or my chief might think this, or the media might run with that. And it's like, dude, I think if our society knew who cops were authentically, that they'd hold us in a much higher regard. Because a lot of people think cops are just these foot soldiers that do what they're told.
Yeah. And
it's like, I don't want to believe that's the case, but why are we afraid of being us? Yeah. You know, like, I think it's cool that you put out a podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And if anyone doesn't like what you say, guess what? That's going to happen if anyone puts out a podcast. Exactly, some people are going to like your message. Some people are going to want to kill you. I've gotten death threats before. Yeah. You know, that's just life, man.
And that's the majority of it is like, it is hard. Like I felt that difficulty with like, man, I'm going to go out there. And so first it started with, you know, wellness, right? The tangible, like physical, mental, talking about peer support, things like that, right? I try to keep it positive, but at the same time, I know that anytime I say anything, some doors might shut, but hopefully some doors open, right? And I just have to resign myself to be like, hey, this is who I am. This is the energy I'm trying to put out.
Have you had
take it a certain way, then so be it.
Have you had any of that happen where like, oh, bro, you said this on the show, and that's something that, you know?
It's not really. It's just kind of a thing. Like,
because that's why Muse isn't here. He's afraid that something might be said.
So, you know, every policy is different. Ours is pretty supportive of like, you can have social media and you can identify. And I think that diplomacy is a thing, right? So I think I've been professional enough that like, hey,
you're even saying effing today.
Effing, I know. And that's like a habit. Like the fact that I try not to swear on mine is just a goal. Cause I'm like, okay, like it's a thing. But at the same time, like, it's just recognizing that.
Well, it's also how you reach your target audience. Yeah. You know, like I tell people all the time, don't play my podcast when your kids are in the car.
Right.
Like that's not my target audience.
Yeah.
And then my kids will come home from school and be like, a bunch of kids in my class listen to your show. And I was like, no.
Yeah. And then I also think that, you know, my kid may listen to mine later, right? And she might listen at an age earlier than I want to. So since I've been pretty good at this habit, like I'm going to keep going on it. But no, so much of just we need to put out story and we need to be able to share. And the fact that I'm doing it in some way and then you've done it in some way that it has empowered others because they're like, man, what Greg said is exactly how me and my buddies feel. It's the conversations we're having. It allows that sentiment to be okay, right?
Well, and something that I say to people is like, we live in a time of technology, and this might sound a little tinfoil-ish, but this is what I believe to be the truth. Most of the major media sources in our country have been compromised, and they're agenda driven and they're funded by certain people. And it is both like politically motivated, financially motivated. And now we live in a time where regular everyday people can put out a message to the entire world.
Yeah.
And then the only thing that needs to happen is other people have to be willing to consume that message. But what that inevitably creates is a synergy between people that share a certain message and then other people out there that want to receive a certain message. There's a lot of people I'm sure that would hate my show, but there's a lot of people that love my show. And I get emails constantly. They're like, bro, I finally decided to commit to eating whole foods and I'm in the gym three days a week and I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this. I'm down 55 pounds. You changed my life. And it's like, I didn't change your life. You changed your life. Yeah. But you received a message that motivated you to change your life. That's where the power happens, because we're used to, as Americans anyways, like we consume our media through our television and our radio, and inevitably that starts to get compromised and controlled. And now we're at a time where everybody can put out their message. Everybody should. Yeah. I got like 5 podcasts that come out of this studio because a bunch of my teammates are like, hey, is it cool if I start a podcast and use the studio? I'm like, of course it is. Because the more people are putting their message out there, the more it combats the narratives that are under control.
Yeah.
And bro, part of being an American is talking about how we feel and freedom of speech and saying the things that we think to be the truth.
By the way, is that like the First Amendment or something like that?
Yeah, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that podcasting is going to be one of the catalysts that could potentially shift this country. You know, you got the biggest guys in the industry now, like Joe Rogan, that are starting to see a lot of the corruption for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And bro, this is the new form of spreading information.
Yeah, independent news and independent thought, right? And so I don't, if anyone does think that that's tinfoily, like, no, let's think about it. Like, I think every person, whatever side of the aisle you're on or in the middle, like, or however involved you are or aren't, like, that these, like, it's not a tinfoil hat conversation to say, like, media companies are companies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And, like, there's sponsorships and all these things. And, think about lobbies. Like, people are, if they're honest with themselves, they know it's a thing, right? And so,
I don't know though, man. We're in a weird time where it seems pretty obvious, but a lot of people are just content kind of being told what to do and what to believe. And it's kind of weird.
It's comfortable, right?
It's comfortable.
Like, pacify me, right? Like, just give me what I need, give me my entertainment and like my food and what I need, right? Like,
put that pacifier in my mouth, like
send
you were
it to
saying.
my house, right? I don't have to go get it. Yeah, it's all these things, but no,
Bro,
I think
I was in LA a year or two ago doing a podcast. It was a cool episode. A guy named Paul DeGelder that lost his arm and his leg to a shark attack. And I was in my hotel and I was like, dude, I'm fucking hungry. What's around here? And I start looking, and the closest place that was like, that had a healthy option was a mile away. So I just Uber Eats it, and it just, 20 minutes later, dude's knocking on my door. And then I got out of bed, grabbed the food, and got back in bed and was eating in bed watching TV. I was like, oh, I feel like a gluttonous slob.
Yeah.
I could have walked a mile and gotten this, but I didn't. I just sat here.
Yeah. They're taking about the same time. Yeah.
And then it made me realize, like, oh, that's probably what everybody's starting to lean more towards. Is just minimizing everything that we do out of comfort and convenience. And it's like, fuck, man.
Yeah.
That's what's going to get us.
No, that sharing of thought and ideas, right? Like, literally just saying, hey, maybe you should work on your mobility, right? Maybe you should try that deep squat. Like, just someone hearing that, they're like, huh, that's something that I could do. That's pretty low hanging fruit. I can work on it. It's not very good, but like these little simple things.
That's why I'm starting my Forge Ferocity program, because it's going to be a lot of little things like that. Like, I'm not selling that I'm going to be like a Tony Robbins and change your whole life as your guru and like your life coach. It's just little things every day that we can do to challenge ourselves. And a lot of it will be based in physicality, but a lot of it won't be, just to try and build habits, Are you a spiritual person?
I would consider myself, yeah.
Like, I don't really know where I land on all this, but I do believe, like, another thing that I tell myself that helps me want to really be rooted in physicality, it's like, I believe that there's something separate from our body. And so we came down to earth, or our spirit was formed in this flesh, and this is our chance to just run it into the dirt, right? Like, we chose to experience physicality, or we get to experience physicality. Let's experience it.
Yeah.
Because one day this ends.
Yeah.
So for me, that's another thing I tell myself that kind of helps me just push really hard. It's like, this is why we're here. I want to get as much as I can out of this opportunity. And it's like, why would I want to just sit on a couch all day? Like, fuck, in 100 years, it's all going to be over anyways. Yeah. So let's push this as hard as I can, Yeah.
Because it's just like, what is the point if you don't feel, I know that spirituality kind of makes people uncomfortable, right? But like, is it all for something, or is it all for not, right? And that's where, I used to be more agnostic, if you want to call it that, right? Like, I'm like, I don't know. Like, now I'm like, there has to be something, like, to reconcile there's a good and there's an evil.
Yeah.
Like, there has to be something else at play that I just just resigned to say, like, there's no way that my brain can comprehend what it is.
I love that.
Or like what, concept of God.
I'm kind of there.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at too. Yeah. Because like, I think it's very arrogant when people want to believe they have every single last aspect of the universe figured out.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to go back and forth on it because it's like, as someone that was like agnostic or what is atheism? What's the difference between being an agnostic and an atheist?
Agnostic is you don't know, and
you
you're
don't
not
know.
really,
That's right.
But
An atheist,
is like,
there's nothing.
No, which is religious.
Which is
in
it's the same
nature,
thing. It's
right?
you saying you know,
you're so sure,
and other people don't know. But you can look at that from two ways. Like if I am agnostic or I'm atheist and I'm not sure what's next, then that means right now is literally everything. This is literally this is everything that I ever am is right now, and I need to take advantage of it. But the other side of that same coin is if this is just a blip in the universe and I'm going to be gone, well, nothing really matters then.
Yeah.
And you can go back and forth between
it's like nihilism, right?
Yeah, nothing I can do can affect change or change the trajectory of the universe. So who gives a shit?
Yeah. It's the balance of the YOLO, right? Like, oh, I am gonna sit in my bed and watch Netflix or whatever. Like, I'm gonna go party it up and it's my last night on earth. It's like, but then there is tomorrow, and so it's like balancing. There's sitting at 5 o'clock in the morning, like working on editing my podcast. I'm like, are there other things I'd rather do right now? Sure. But like I enjoyed this and I enjoy the project that it'll probably be tomorrow or if it airs, a month from now.
Yeah. And
also I can go work out and also I can have intentional family time, right? But I think it's that intent in being in the present, which I'm not good at. Like that's one of my biggest challenges is setting down the phone, especially when, you and I are putting out social media. That takes time, right? And then you get sucked into absorbing it. I'm trying not to absorb it. I'm trying to just create.
Right, yeah.
But that's so hard.
I don't know what the right answer is because on one hand, I want to interact with people, right? But on the other hand, like, bro, I rarely even read the comments anymore. I'll read the comments if it's like a jiu-jitsu post because it's like, hey, well, I'm talking about jiu-jitsu. There's not really people going to be like, hey, fuck you, you're an idiot, right? But if it's something that's like political, and I go back and forth on it because like my slogan is informed but not consumed. We can't just put our head in the sand and not ever talk about certain things that are taking place. But I also don't let it consume my whole fucking life. And if I post something that upsets some people, I'm not on Instagram to have a back and forth with negative energy.
No.
I'm not really interested in that.
It won't go anywhere anyway.
It's not going to, it's like, have you ever had someone be like, hey, you know what? I commented saying you're a stupid fucking idiot. And then you commented back and then a dialogue formed and I really see your perspective now and it helped me grow as a person.
Yeah.
Like very rarely are you seeing that shit, And so I don't know what the right answer is, but bro, Instagram, and I don't do Twitter. Twitter, I think, is more of a cesspool than Instagram. Is that accurate? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't really deal with Twitter either? Or X as it's called. Like I do have a buddy that other buddies watch. Like they just follow him just to see how riled up he gets about sports and Alaska Airlines and what like he engages in the back and forth with trolls, or he's been labeled as a troll at times, right? But like how toxic of that is it on your day and your psyche to be consumed in that?
Well, bro, every single thing that I follow is like you go into the comments and it's conflict. Always.
Yeah.
Like, do you know who Wes Watson is? Do you follow that dude? So he was a guy that did 10 years, a bunch of time in the shoe, like gangster, all blasted with tats and like wild motherfucker. But he got out and changed his life, dude. And now he's like a coach and an entrepreneur. He's doing very well. Pretty fascinating person. But I was reading one of his posts this morning. He was talking about how he did a bunch of time in the shoe and how that helped him grow and like the experience of that. And then you go into the comments and it's like, oh, so you're saying because I didn't fucking make really bad decisions and become a criminal that I don't have the right, that I'm not going to be able to grow in the way that you grew. And
Did
it's
he
just,
say that? Yeah.
Yeah. And just on and on and on and on and on. And I was like, that's enough internet for the day because no matter what your message is, someone wants to combat it. And that's a weird thing about us. And I honestly feel like the phones have empowered people to be more combative than we are by nature. Because you never see people interact like that in real life.
Right. No, they would never.
No.
They would never. They would
You know?
mutter like traditional media, like they'd hear something on the radio or on the TV and they'd mutter something in the kitchen and your wife and your kid would hear it. You're like, oh, the dumb whatever is happening again. They're
Yeah.
like, huh. And then you get it off your chest. But how much do you wonder, okay, so we talked about like conflict and like, young men wanting to fight. Like how much do you think that that's because a lot of these people, trolls and everything else, they lack any sort of adversity, right? They're not going into the gym and trying to max out on the bench. They're not rolling. They're not
100%. Yeah.
They're not doing that. So they're hungry for something and it's going to be that.
Have you heard of the book The Obstacle is the Way?
No.
So it's right in line with the things that we're saying, but there isn't a journey with a destination. It's just understanding that we have to consistently go through adversity and hardship to maintain the trajectory of growth. And we have arrived at a place in society where everything is, for the most part, very comfortable unless you choose to step outside of that comfortableness of our lives. Whereas even as recently as 100 years ago, there's going to be hardships you go through just to sustain life. And if you don't, we're going to have problems, I feel like because everything is so comfortable now that people are seeking some adversity, probably on even a subconscious level. And that's why the internet's just become a cesspool,
Yeah.
Like
I can see that.
Get up and go to the gym, get up and fucking shoot your bow for an hour and then go for a run.
Yeah.
Go to the jiu-jitsu, and suddenly you're probably not going to get on the internet and talk shit to everybody.
Right. Yeah. Or someone signs up for a 5K. Maybe that's like they've never done one in their life. Like, yeah, you got to train for that if you've never done it.
Yeah.
And you're going to get out of bed and you're going to do the thing and it's going to be cold out, right? Like that's what people need. They need that challenge. They need some version of it.
It's really crazy when you think about it from like a historical perspective. Life was fucking hard until very recently.
Oh yeah. Sometimes I think about like, would I be alive? And there's definitely all these, like, would I be alive today? With 38, I'd be like, maybe that's way past like what would have been in the cards for me, right? Like I had, nearsighted. I've had LASIK, right, in my adulthood, but like, okay, where would my eyesight be today, and would that have killed me, right? Like, would I have been, whatever time period, right? Like maybe I wouldn't have been able to outrun that lion, right?
No, it's funny, dude, because I actually I had some issues with my knees when I was in utero.
Oh wow!
Right, and the umbilical cord wrapped around one of my knees, and literally tourniqueted it off. And like one of my legs didn't grow to nearly what the other leg did. And when I was born, the doctor's like, this baby will never walk.
Wow.
And then it's, how human beings, it's weird because on one hand, our bodies are fragile as fuck. And then on the other side, like super resilient. And my body compensated and grew, and like, it was never an issue. But I think about that. If I was in Sparta, I would have got thrown in the the pit, dude.
See you, dude. Like, you're a waste.
Waste.
Yeah. Like, I'm curious. How much of your parents do you know that they're like, no, he'll be fine? Like, did your mom have any of that belief?
No, she said like initially it was kind of scary to hear that, but then just life happens, and you just like they never put any weight in that,
Yeah.
And
I think there's something to that.
No, and my dad was a hard motherfucker too. Like he wasn't, I don't care what was wrong with me. There's no babying. Like go figure it out,
Go punch that kid in the face.
Yeah, go punch that kid in the face. And bro, my upbringing with that guy was so, I don't want to say rough because like we had a good relationship. We didn't have a good relationship when I was a kid because he was so hard on me. But when I grew up, he made it very clear. He's like, hey, I was raising a son. I wasn't your best friend. I had to be hard on you. And it was actually like a strategy of his. And my mother is actually, she apologizes to me often to this day. She's like, I just, when you were a little boy, your dad was so hard on you. And it's like, well, I'm pretty happy with who I grew into.
Yeah.
So what's to say that's right or wrong? But yeah, it wasn't rooted in like love and kindness. It was like, hey, toughen the fuck up,
But did you get that from other places like your mom, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
100%, dude. Yeah. And that's where it's like, I think there's a balance where you need that loving, nurturing side in your household, but you need some hardness too. And I have all daughters because the universe wasn't going to let me raise sons because I wasn't ready to.
Yeah.
You know?
That's so interesting.
And I think about that because up until recently, I probably would have been real hard on them too.
Yeah, I know I would be. You know, like I'm a girl dad, so it's funny. I think that, you know, my wife likes to read some like kind of astrology stuff, and it's kind of interesting, like the universe, like what do you need? You know, what, and sometimes, you know, especially because I had such a poor relationship with my dad, and I had these themes and these contention points of like what is masculinity and what is being a man. I think, you know, it led to me being a cop, right, to prove this manliness, right, in some sense. But
Yeah.
you know, when my mom's teaching me how to shave and how to drive as an stereotype Asian female, but that's not the best, and it was not the best, right? And like, so all these things. But then I do think, you know, for a time before we knew it was a girl, I was thinking like I wanted a boy, and but then as soon as I think I wanted a boy, I was like, I was scared. You know, I was like, man, I think I figured out how to be a man, but do I know how to teach one? Because I never, like, I was largely self-taught, and then I had a lot of mentors and family friends, things like that. But when I found out it was a girl, I felt so actually relieved. I remember telling my wife, like when we found out, we were walking back to the car and getting to the parking garage, I was like, I feel so much less pressure. And I do feel these angsty moments sometimes where I feel like I need to be tough and like stern with her. And then when I reset, I'm like, no, I need to release, and I can let my wife be stern with her. Right. Like, like jokingly, but in a sense, like I do think that I needed that softer, nurturing part of being a parent.
Yeah. And it's also like, it's another dichotomy because right now I'm in a house with my wife and an 8, 12, and 14-year-old girls. And bro, it's just, I'm literally just surrounded by feminine energy and estrogen. And it's like
a few emotions here and there.
Yeah, fuck, man. Sometimes I'm like, God, I just need to sit down.
Yeah.
I'll grab we have 3 dogs too.
Yeah.
2 are females and 1's a male.
Oh, I was going to say, like, do you have a bro dog somewhere?
Bro, yeah, I'll grab Kobe. He's the only other male in the house and be like, dude, I just need some bro energy right now, you know? But then they cut his nuts off, so he's barely a man too.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I learned, I would say over the last couple of years as a coach, a better way of mentoring young men. Because you know our society, there's a lot of young men that don't have positive male role models in their life. And inevitably, if you feel that positive male energy from your jiu-jitsu coach, and it's little girls and little boys. I have a lot of students that I'm not just a jiu-jitsu coach to them. I can see it in their eyes. Like I have little girls that come and hug me goodbye after every practice. And they hold me in a little different regard than just a coach. You know, like you can feel a bond forming between us. And it's taught me a lot about what I think little girls and little boys need. And I think at this point in my life, I could be a phenomenal dad to a boy. I'm just not too keen on starting over at 43.
Yeah. But I think that's so huge. Like, there is a social ill. There's several social ills, but one of the biggest ones in my belief is the lack of fatherhood. And that's not the lack of, you know, dads out there, but that's like true fatherhood. And there's so many ways that luckily we're in a decent space where a lot of people are stepping up and they're not even relatives, right? Like such as yourself, like figures in the community, coaches, teachers, like every respect of that. That's what's making up the gap. And the more people step that up, the more people like, you know, breaking cycles, right?
Yeah.
Like, because people invested in me, I'm not a crappy dad. And so that hopefully that Tung legacy is done, you know, and I don't blame my dad for a lot of things, you know, in my adulthood. Like I was mad, like we got in a fight, and then I resigned at one point in my young adulthood where I said, you know, I'm gonna visit his grave once, and I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna spit on it, right? Like I thought about changing my name to remove his legacy, like literally, like to honor my mother's side, change, which is super unconventional.
It's kind of dark, but I also see why you would want to do that too.
Yeah, and we were so, you know, I didn't talk to him for 8 years, and it wasn't until he was nearing his deathbed that I recognized that I could heal that. I could give. Essentially, I recognized I wasn't angry, and then if I could offer him some peace a dying man peace. Like, would you offer a stranger peace if you went and saw this person on their deathbed and helped them a little bit with that probably terrifying process?
Yeah, of course.
I'm like, well, shoot, I could do that. Okay, why not your dad? And I was like, all right, so I kind of had that chatter, and then
did you feel like it helped with closure?
Hugely.
Okay.
And so I've talked to people like close in my circles, and then not so close, like people that I've interacted with. And I was like, hey, I would never, presume to say that our situations are similar, but for what it's worth, if you do find it in yourself to reconcile, if not even like, partially, you could say that's selfish, and it was selfish for me in some ways, right? I didn't want to regret not doing it if it was too late.
Yeah.
At the same time, you put your shoes in someone else, you try to empathize, but I thought, hey, if I ever have a kid and something happens and I have this seemingly irreparable, dynamic, like what would I give to repair that? And I kind of put that in that without details or anything. I was like, man, if I can demonstrate that, then maybe I'm in a better space to repair something in the future, right? With my own kid. So it's sincerely glad I did that.
Well, bro, and you hear people say all the time, like, forgiveness is actually for you.
It is, yeah.
And that's okay, too.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, like, having a self-serving attitude, like, that's kind of considered bad, right?
Yeah.
But
the word's selfish, right? Rather than like self-focused or something.
But the other side of that coin is, and I've talked to a lot of my teammates, I've found this out. They're like, man, they want to give and give and give to their family and their friends to the detriment of themselves. And then if you conduct yourself in a manner which becomes detrimental to you, you're actually less capable of being the person that they need.
Yeah.
And like one of my students, he did the podcast, his name's Steven. He's a leader in the military. I think he's an E9 in the Navy. And he's like, my job wasn't being the guy out on the front leading the charge anymore. My job became taking care of the troops, making sure they were capable.
Yeah.
He goes, and before I knew it, I was justifying in my head, like, oh, I don't need to work out today. Oh, I don't need to worry about, dude, I'm just going to grab a pizza and eat on the go because we got this job. We got to do all these different things.
That's the thing.
And he's like, before I knew it, I was fucking 50 pounds overweight. And now my troops are looking at me like, who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
Why should I listen to you? You know?
We're kind of going full circle, right? It's in the military, but like, police, right? So we talk about unhealthy police way earlier on, but how do you change that? It's leadership as well, right? And so we know, and this is not for people to feel bad about admin, right? Like now I'm one of the command, but I recognize.
Did you get a lobotomy? Right? Do people tell you that joke?
They also say,
you're part of command now?
Yeah, the other joke, right? Like, you had the upstairs removed or the downstairs, right? Like, so ultimately, like, but we can look honestly, whether you like or dislike your bosses, you can recognize there's a wellness issue, right? A lot of them aren't well, and they're stressed by the bureaucracy, by, the ones that are likable. I'd say, like, I can remember a lot of bosses that I respected and that I respected the troops, but were they like living their best life as command? Like, often not.
Dude, I think, and what do I know? I never made it to any type of high-ranking leadership position.
You've seen it, though.
But I'll tell you, I learned a lot about leadership right here on the mats, too.
Yeah.
Because this is a leadership position,
Absolutely.
right? And what I have found is, you have to lead from the front, both with, like, how you live your day-to-day life, your motivation, how you take care of your physical body, how you just live day to day. The troops are watching. And if you're overweight or you're a slob or you don't do the little, like the saying goes, how you do something is how you do everything, right? So if they see people in the command staff cutting corners and being lazy, it kind of lets you know, man, they probably don't have my back on anything, right? Yeah. And at the port, there was a handful of different, every agency has like their chief and then their A chief and then some other they're technically chiefs. Like we call them chief, but I don't really know what your job is, you know? And the same thing, a handful of commanders with different, allocated to different positions. And one of the chiefs at the port, I was there for 4 years. He never even said hello to me. And he'd always be walking around, kind of head kind of down, not engaging with people. Never once came to roll call. Yeah. Not one time. And then it wasn't until I got terminated that he wrote some memo against me. And it's like, bro, and I wrote Chief Covey, the real chief at the time. And I was like, hey, this motherfucker, he hasn't talked to me in 4 fucking years. He wants to fucking, and what he did is he went through my social media and pulled stuff from years earlier to pad the packet.
To make a case.
To make a case against me. And here was one of the ironic things is I spoke out about veteran suicide one day on a post. But when I was talking about it, I was in uniform, right? So he got me on that. It's like he was in uniform. And this was like 3 years earlier.
Oh.
And the funny thing is Chief Covey came to me right after that post came out because he lost a child to suicide. And he goes, Greg, I love it when people put messages out like that. And so it's like, you never showed any compassion or leadership or desire to know me as a person until it was time to try and terminate me. And then you'll start fucking going like, you'll stop at nothing. And then the other side of the coin is I had a commander who's still there today. And bro, he would pull me in his office. And I'm the equivalent of a private at the port. I'm a patrol officer. I hold no leadership, right? But he pulled me in his office. He goes, Greg, I know you're a newer cop here, but you've also done a lot of things. You have a lot of life experience and people are drawn to you. And I want you to tell me what you think I could do to be a better commander around here. I'm curious what your opinion is that could make me a better commander. And he goes, and you can think on this. I want to talk to you about it next week. And then he goes, and then also, I want you to recommend a book to me that you think would make me a better commander. And I was like, sir, what you're doing right now is what makes you a better commander. That's it. That's where the magic happens. Yeah. You're pulling people into your office that have no leadership position whatsoever, and you're making them feel valued.
Yeah.
Right now, you're making my opinion or my thought process something that you're putting weight in. That's the magic right there.
Yeah.
And I said, and you also come around roll call and you come to report writing. And I said, and it's a delicate balance, right? You don't want your fucking chief in report writing all day, right?
Yeah.
Like, dude, get away from me. I want to shoot the shit with the guys. Yeah. But I also don't want you to be a stranger either.
Yeah. You want to be visible. You want to be accessible. Right.
Yes.
And like he in that moment, he saw you, he valued you, he gave you time, but he also gave you his ears. He was actually requesting it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That humility that it takes for that.
And those little things build massive amounts of leadership capital. And like, it's strange to me because you can go pick up a fucking Jocko book. And I always say this because I love Jocko's message. Mm-hmm. And I don't say this with any negative connotations, but what Jocko teaches is pretty basic military leadership strategy.
Sure.
It is.
Yeah.
It's just kind of tweaked it to apply to the corporate world as well, you know? And he kind of breaks down basically like shoot, move, and communicate.
Yeah. And it doesn't take anything away from him that it's genius in that how you distill that message so it can be so scalable and so accessible, right? Like decentralized command, ownership, right? Like these things, yes, it's not super crazy thought process, but that he was able to put it in such a way. Yeah. That's genius.
Yeah. And I mean, he also wrote his, Way of the Warrior Kid books. Mm-hmm. Have you seen those?
I heard about it. Yeah.
So my kids read those and I was like, and I read them to my younger daughters. I was like, everybody should read these. Even though they're written to be consumed by 10-year-olds, the message is still a message that everybody should probably receive.
Check that out. I remember hearing about it. Yeah.
You know, but it's interesting. And it's cool seeing guys like you that are moving up the chain, that are in a leadership position now, that still seem like you're rooted in reality and still want the best for the troops and still want to move the needle in the right direction. Because, bro, if when that is lost, and I'm sure you've seen it if you've been in the profession for 17 years, but you get a couple shitty people at the top, the culture is broken from top to bottom now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I don't say it to like elevate my own status or my, my brand, but I say this as an example because there's going to be people in my similar situation that want to be part of the change, right? Maybe they're a sergeant, they're just kind of hanging out. And for me, coming out of recruiting, once we closed the gap, it was a really cush spot to be in, right? At first, I took the job and I was like, I asked my boss like how long he needed, and I was like, there's no way I can do this more than 5 years. He's like, I need 1. And I was like, I'll give you probably 2, and then I'm going to get so bored and not feel like a cop.
Yeah.
Right? And all these things. And so at the same time, I had like literally whatever schedule I wanted. I could work all the overtime I wanted, helping with backgrounds, working on my side projects. Like I had all the autonomy and a hands-off boss. Like what would be better than that, right? And also the physical danger removed from some, family's a lot happier.
Yeah.
I can actually be around for my kid. I can make all my hours around my kid, who's, only four-ish right now. And so to leave that behind, it was certainly not like a lifestyle upgrade. I took a pay cut because you don't have overtime, as you know how that works. But it was like with the sincere belief of like, I'm not chasing the rank. I'm trying to chase the influence, and to recognize like at a sergeant, you have influence, but to make things change as far as programs,
you don't have much.
Not much. And command, like honestly, not much more. As a mid-manager, but I was able to get.
So we got to get you to chief then.
What's that? No, man.
Like it or not, you're going to be the chief.
That sounds pretty terrible. Someone's going to quote me on that later. But it does. It truly does. But,
well, and bro, you can say that sounds terrible, but I tell people all the time, if you look at leadership correctly, leadership is a burden.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is always a burden, politically too. Like, you know who should be the president of the United States? Is the
someone
person
that
wants nothing to do
Yeah.
with the presidency, right? And I mean, to take it back to when I was a young ranger and they pinned me sergeant, I didn't want that. I even told my PL, I'm like, sir, I don't want to be a sergeant. He goes,
You're the dude.
guess what? That's the beauty in this, is that you don't have any say in it.
Yeah.
And he actually promoted me in Afghanistan because he goes, right here, I can do what's called a combat promotion.
Yeah.
Because when you get promoted back stateside, you have to put in a packet and actually aspire to promote.
Yeah.
And I was happy just being
It's
a
like
tab
a
spec
literal field
4.
promotion, like
A
you're
field
it.
promotion.
Yeah.
He's like, you're sergeant now. Go take your team. And I was like, fuck, dude.
Yeah.
But that's a healthy way. And again, like I always say, jiu-jitsu mirrors life. Like when I tie purple belts on people, very, very often I can tell they're like, fuck, I'm not ready for this, And I said, that's what you're supposed to feel because you're now leader. A purple belt is a leadership position in an academy and it should feel a little scary, I'll tell people though, when you get your purple belt, never tell your instructor you shouldn't have done this because now you're telling that person that they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's healthy. Like when you move up through the ranks, the last, and I saw this in the Marshal Service a lot, the people that are just like, me, they rarely make good supervisors.
Yeah. You're chasing something else, It's like, and for something as simple and like broad as like wellness, I was like, man, if I could be in charge of growing that program as a commander, like it will give it more legs.
Yeah.
Ironically, I have like less bandwidth to do it because of all the other things that trickle your way. But it's like, I have no regrets. Like I have to be sure of the mission, right? And that's to help my cops while I'm there.
Yeah.
So they can help the community. And like, it's in tandem. It's not if or, it's and.
Something that I used to think about in the Marshal Service anyways, when you go from regular deputy, a POD, a plain old deputy, to a supervisory deputy, that is when you go from GS-12 to GS-13. And it is like almost a $30,000 pay increase. It's a huge pay bump, which you take on more responsibility. You should probably be compensated a little more. I get that, right? Sure. But what it inevitably becomes is people chasing their GS-13 because they want that $30,000 a year bonus.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, if you're motivated by money to jump into a leadership position, there needs to be a little more than just that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, if you want the best leaders, it should probably come with a pay cut, right?
right. And
but it's tough.
You gotta work swings and weekends too. You gotta take your turn in the bucket. So like, I gave that up, and it's it's part of it. So again, like where I start is if I've had a lot of people reach out DMs or like phone conversations from agencies. Different states, right? Different cities where they're like, I'm considering going to this unit. I'm kind of being tapped or considering promoting, but I don't know if it's too soon. I was like, if you're being tapped from above and below, it's not too soon. You need to do it. And like, as long as there's nothing concrete that you haven't fulfilled in your own personal goals and your career, like just go, right? Like you can find a way to get involved with things that's actually great, right? Leadership, like to be tied in with things and being effective and being engaged. But we're not at a point where we can attach ourselves to these old arbitrary timelines, right?
Yeah.
Policing is so young now because we had so much attrition. So those that are there that Hey, maybe we have 3-4 year FTOs. Maybe we have 5-6 year sergeants, and that's okay if they're the right people with the right intent.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that at the port because you can promote fast at the port, and the old guys like, how the fuck's he a sergeant in 3 years? What the fuck,
Yeah,
It's like,
you didn't put your name in the hat, or you didn't
That's right.
outperform.
Yeah.
So it's like onus, right?
That's right, dude.
Yeah.
Well, bro, I gotta tell you, we're already at 2:10, and I usually keep these at 2 hours.
Yeah, man.
But I like doing podcasts with people that have other podcasts
Yeah.
because it just flows.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's been a
But,
lot of fun. I had no idea. Sometimes I was wondering how long it's been. I was like, I'm sure it's been longer, but it's just been fun.
It's 2:10, bro,
Yeah.
right there. Give a shout out to your podcast again, and that's also your Instagram. That's where people can reach out.
Exactly. Yeah, my podcast is Blue Grit Radio, so it's on Spotify, Apple, all the things.
Okay.
My Instagram's where I'm most active, so I talk about police stuff, wellness, and peer support. Sometimes training does pop in, right? Like a video where I'm like, hey, like something to think about, just because these all kind of intersect with my life and what I think about.
For sure,
way
man.
too many hours of the day. But yeah, also like work-life balance, family. So yeah, that's Blue Grit Wellness, and that's on Instagram.
Okay, and I'll link all that in the show notes below as always. And then you brought me some coffee too as you were walking in. What's the story of this?
There's not really a story.
Okay.
No kickback, no affiliation. Man, maybe they will now.
Kicking horse coffee.
Kicking
It's
horse
just good coffee, huh?
It's just good coffee. And
Okay.
it's organic. I think it's fair trade.
It's organic ground coffee.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I will. I'm a coffee snob, so I'm excited. But if I hate it, I'm gonna let them. I'm gonna let the listeners know in the next episode.
Yeah, the next. You're like,
Since
hey,
they
by the way,
did-
remember
since-
that
yeah.
shout out? Undo.
Yeah, I hate that company.
Yeah,
So
removed.
well, cool, man. I appreciate it, and fuck, maybe we'll fucking do this again sometime, man.
Yeah, I'd love that.
All right.